Chapter 398. On the Santa Freya commercial street at night, under the streetlights, the black-haired young man looked at the words in Teresa's notebook and fell into a daze for a moment. Such words reflected in the young man's eyes made Luoya confused and at a loss at what to do at the same time. Currently, Xia was not in a large-scale war for the time being, and Luoya was the only son of the Marquis of the Theocracy. Where did this so-called hardship come from? However, the clan that Teresa mentioned caught Luoya's attention. The Ard clan. To be precise, it's Mr. Luoya's ancestor, Wendy Ard. Suddenly hearing the name of an ancestor that he had never heard of before, the black-haired young man frowned and his gaze became a lot more serious. However, he did not expect Teresa to suddenly change the topic and ask a question that surprised Luoya. I've heard of it. It's an alliance formed by angels, dragons, and highland elves, right? I've seen an ancestor who protected their great creation in a historical fragment before. But is this matter related to the alliance of the three races? The pink-haired girl wrote silently and told Luoya a piece of unknown history of the three races in ancient times. In ancient times, as time passed and Xia's environment changed, the mythical races gradually could not adapt to this world. They anxiously searched for a way to continue their bloodline and finally set their sights on the human race that many prophecies said would become powerful. That was why there were so many alien bloodlines today. However, the prophecies of the alliance of the three races did not stop there. Whether it was the mother goddess or the savior, they had brought great disasters to the supernatural races in ancient times. Therefore, preventing them from reviving had always been one of the major goals of the Twilight Sage Association. Luoya had long been aware of this point, but the young man was not concerned about this point. Luoya frowned deeply as the figures of the two girls appeared in his mind. He took it seriously in his heart, but at the same time he was a little puzzled because although this prophecy was important, it did not seem to belong to Luoya. That's right. Because at the end of the Second Era, Wendy Ard of the Ard clan once again accurately predicted this prophecy. This is also the reason for William's current situation. At the end of the Second Era, one of the scattered members of the Twilight Sage Association. She was a famous master of astrology and prophecy at that time. Almost all the members in the early days of the Kingdom of Knights were followers who were saved by her. In other words, the Kingdom of Knights was a country established by her knights. Hearing this, the black-haired young man couldn't help but widen his eyes. He finally understood why the Kingdom of Knights treated him so differently. But Wendy Ard and Ard's prophecy, Wendy's prophecy, Xia's, but Wendy's, Ard's, this. But even when she was dying, Luoya, this great ancestor, was still worried about the future of the people around her. And because of that, she used her unparalleled talent to predict the fate for the last time. The prophecy was the prophecy of the destruction of the three races alliance and the future of the Ard clan who had always been fighting against them. The prophecy was about the time of the destruction of the three races alliance. Wendy predicted that it would happen 1,000 years later and that the Ard clan's inheritance would be severed. The bloodline awakened would face great danger. However, the prophecy about the specific situation of the Ard clan was very chaotic. First prophecy, the descendants of the Ard clan will fall into depravity. They are in great danger. Stay away. Third prophecy, the descendants of the Ard clan will die in an academy under the witness of the successors of the three races. Chapter 399. Do you feel guilty about this to me? Normally, the natural awakening of your clan would make the user of the Shadow Warrior armor feel something and take action. But for so many years, Williams didn't feel anything. As for the so-called guilt, Luoya didn't even know where to start. After knowing the series of things about Williams, Luoya, who got a death exemption, didn't feel happy. Instead, he was angry. But he had to admit that he actually understood the Ald clan's approach rationally. Was the Ald clan wrong? From their point of view, they weren't wrong. The users of the armor were obviously voluntary. They must have received great kindness from the Ald clan and were willing to repay with their lives. The purpose of doing this was only to prevent the sudden death of their clansmen due to the awakening of their bloodline. Remember, under the street lamp, the black-haired boy opened his eyes. He looked at the girl beside him calmly and said softly, "But Williams is very strong. He must be of great help to Mr. Luoya, right?" Facing Luoya's sudden question, the pink-haired girl's pen paused. She blinked and didn't know how to answer for a moment. The black-haired boy saw this and smiled faintly. Looking at the starry sky in the distance, the black-haired boy sighed under Teresa's surprised gaze and said, "The reason is very simple. Because we are warriors who resist fate. We resist the fate of certain death, the fate of the decline of our clan, and the unfortunate fate of our loved ones. We are in a desperate situation, but we will never bow to fate. This is our spirit and also our glory. Because of this, Akkad can survive for thousands of years after its inheritance was cut off." The young man's resolute voice caused the girl beside him to widen her eyes. On the other side, the white-haired witch silently chanted the hero's name as the corner of her lips curled up. The Earth Mother closed her eyes in peace. In the blood-colored plains, the eyes of the gigantic skeleton burst out with radiance. That was the praise from a warrior who was equally as great. Luoya didn't deny the concerns and actions of the ancestors of the Ald clan. However, as the saying went, there were things that a great man should and shouldn't do. Luoya wouldn't back down on some choices. But Williams is very stubborn. I don't think he'll give up on bringing you away. He thinks it's his duty and his goal. I hope that he can choose again and choose his own goal. That's right. If his purpose is to become a guardian of the past prophecy, then our differences will probably always exist. I will also insist on rejecting him. But if his purpose is to become someone who can travel together with me and fight alongside me, then I will use the way of the country of knights to let him understand that his fate has changed and meaningless sacrifices are no longer necessary. Well then, Miss Teresa, let's call it a night. Thank you for telling me all this." Hearing the words of the pink-haired girl, Luoya nodded slightly and turned around to leave the commercial street. Teresa smiled at the young man's back until Luoya completely disappeared. Then, she turned her gaze to a corner behind her. And under her gaze, the young girl in a cloak and full of armor finally appeared. He should have noticed it too. Your presence is too unique." After several interactions, Teresa actually had the intention to understand Luoya's character. Today's conversation was also based on the premise that Teresa believed that Luoya wouldn't accept William's self-sacrifice. And the reason was simple. As an elder sister, Teresa didn't want her distant relative to have such an ending. Every time she saw Williams in this state, Teresa, who used to play with him when they were young, would feel heartache. Both of them had the bloodline of dragons. She, who was known as the Princess of Curses, lived a luxurious life and was loved by the people. However, a real princess couldn't even wear a dress. "How is it, Mina? Are you happy? Didn't I say that he wouldn't leave you alone?" The young girl in armor lowered her head, not knowing how to react. Teresa smiled and wrote, "What? Noble and proud, fearless and powerful. Isn't this the spirit that a knight pursues?" Thinking so, the young girl ridiculed the young man's duplicity in her heart. She had to admit that Luoya's performance in the previous battle had trampled on the young girl's points. It was also because of this that Williams hid in a panic and only dared to show himself after leaving. What's left was a true competition of strength. Before such a major competition began, the contestants would deliberately avoid contact. On one hand, it was to prevent being accused of colluding to manipulate the competition. On the other hand, private contact could affect the fighting spirit of both sides, thus affecting the results of the competition. In the eyes of the young man, this was no longer just a competition for the championship of the Challengers Cup. It was also a competition to prove his beliefs and strength. His opponent wasn't just Williams, but also the will left behind by Alfred from 1,000 years ago, which was no longer in line with the times. Due to the controversial nature of the previous match between Williams and Lillian, the reputation of the tournament organizers had taken a hit. Regarding this, the tournament planners had to actively deal with public relations, and the method was to divert the attention of the public to the next match. Although the battle between Luoya and Williams wasn't as eye-catching as the battle of the century, or the clash of the two strongest geniuses due to the difference in their strength, It was fortunate that Luo Ya's performance throughout the competition was outstanding. Many spectators in the Austin Empire believed that Lillian's match was rigged. A considerable number of them were antagonistic towards Williams, so they hoped that Luo Ya would win. But it must be said that these spectators in the Austin Empire weren't Luo Ya's supporters. To be precise, they supported anyone who wasn't Williams to become the champion. This year's Challengers Cup was the only one where the age of participants was lowered. But after the cruel elimination, the two contestants who made it to the finals were both first-year students. This became the biggest explosive point of the competition. The meaning of the words golden generation could be said to be quite significant. In history, those who were crowned with this title were the heroes of the generation who led the race through the crisis when mankind was facing a crisis. In the current situation where the alien race was in danger, this word represented the future of mankind. The promotion of the championship title made the entire competition even more important. The news media, the people of Leinster, the spectators from all over the world, and even the official teams of each country were a little restless. They began to stand on the side to create momentum for the contestants they favored. Under the notice of the casino and in front of the bar counter in the tavern, all kinds of disputes continued. In the Leinster Battle Arena, more than 100 contestants who passed the preliminary round had gathered again. They were waiting in the spectator seats to see who would become the champion of the younger generation. In the commentator seats, the officials of the theocracy and the country of knights were also nervous. Of course, they hoped that their countries would obtain the final honor. At the highest point, Antonio's face was calm and the corners of his mouth were curled up in a smile. Under everyone's expectant gaze, the opening music played and the final curtain slowly opened. Chapter 400. Leinster, the capital of the Kingdom of Scholars, was now deserted. Amidst the majestic music, the Leinster Coliseum welcomed the main characters of the building with the highest level of etiquette. For carriages specially prepared to welcome the contestants drove into the arena, and the audience cheered in unison. In the Rose faction, Paul and Gerlach led their members to cheer loudly for Luo Ya who entered the arena. Next door, Xia Luot, who was surrounded by the nobles of Rochet, did not perform divination today. Instead, she chose to witness everything with her eyes. With the vast terrain, Lillian's army spread out smoothly, while Teresa used spells to shift to the air to fight. The battle of attrition between the two sides was quite intense. In the end, Lillian secured victory with the great spell of the Magician Legion. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, the black-haired young man and the knight in heavy armor finally entered the arena. At the same time, the cheers of the supporters of both sides rang out. The overly loud sound once overwhelmed the voice of the tournament organizers, forcing the tournament host to wave his hand to calm the crowd. Don't worry, give it your all. This is a once-in-a-lifetime match. No matter what, we shouldn't leave any regrets here. To hold back in this final match was not only disrespectful to the audience, but also to the other contestants who had fought in the tournament. Williams seemed to agree with this point. Well, then let's decide with victory or defeat, whether it's your fate or mine. Due to the fierce battle of the Challengers Cup, the contestants with powerful curses often suffered excessive injuries. The tournament organizers generally increased the substitute curse beasts for both sides in the final to ensure safety. Therefore, in this game, the substitute curse beasts for Roja and Williams increased from 5 to 10. Antonio, who was wearing a robe, glanced at the two below and smiled. Then he held up the crystal ball and spoke under the nervous gaze of the audience. As soon as he finished speaking, the scene in the crystal ball constantly changed and finally stopped on a crimson land. Oh! Scorched mountain range. The climate was hot, the land was crimson, and there was almost no vegetation. Therefore, it could be said that there was no decent hiding place. To some extent, the situation was somewhat similar to the battle against Gelt. There was basically no opportunity to ambush the enemy. Therefore, there was only one tactic left to be used: a head-on confrontation. Fighting spirit burned silently in the hearts of the boy and girl. The responsibility that had been instilled in them for many years conflicted with the personal desire in the bottom of their hearts, making Williams long for Luo Ya to give her an answer. The black-haired boy had long since made up his mind to break William's shackles with his own hands. The dregs of the old era should be removed, and the people who were bound should be liberated. And the beginning of all of this was this moment, this very moment. Sword intent. This was something that Luoya had never felt before. But now, it was really displayed in front of him, making him feel an enormous pressure. Under this pressure, his body began to produce hallucinations. Luoya had a vague premonition that William's heart sword was about to reach its peak. Chapter 401. Trump cards were the most important factor in a supernatural being's battle. This was because it was generally difficult to determine the outcome of a battle using ordinary spells. Only unexpected abilities or battle tactics would be able to deal a decisive blow. Although this statement was too absolute, it showed how important trump cards were to extraordinaries. And powerful extraordinaries such as Xia usually had 2 trump cards. Different source substances often led to a decisive difference in the way extraordinaries obtained their power. This difference was more inclined towards growth. Most of the time, it did not affect the battle as much as imagined. The thing that really affected the battle the most was the bloodline. Among William's trump cards, one was the heart sword that he had tempered with his willpower for many years, the other was courage, one of the 3 most suitable origin substances for battle, and the last was the giant dragon bloodline that he had inherited from ancient times. In front of him, Petra's curse flame stream had turned into a raging fire, and a burning heat wave swept across the already scorching land. However, in the center of the flames, William's curse reaction not only did not decrease, but also expanded like never before. Amidst the burning lava from the Earth's core, a pair of golden eyes lit up under the blazing flames. At the moment it opened its eyes, a pressure that belonged to ancient mythical creatures came from afar, as if it could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. It spread out its wings, and the scorching lava was easily split apart like it was a toy, completely exposing its majestic body to everyone's eyes. Oh. The judges of the tournament were speechless as they watched the video. The department in charge of the arcane realm was very nervous. The rising spell reaction was as awe-inspiring as the majestic appearance of the giant creature, but it also made the arcane realm very uneasy. In the scorched mountain range, Luoya looked into the distance with a serious face. As the only person who faced the dragon's pressure head-on, he knew better than anyone else how terrifying William's was. Atavistic bloodline. This was the truth behind William's incomprehensible power. The giant dragon constructed with this powerful bloodline ability was almost the same as a real giant dragon. Thousands of meters away, the dragon and the black-haired young man looked at each other. Both sides knew that they could no longer fight a war of attrition. A strange silence fell. Neither Williams nor Luoya acted rashly, but the spell power in the arcane realm began to gather around them. The audience in the arena returned to their seats after the commotion, nervously waiting for the two to make their next move. Time went by, but the situation on the battlefield did not change much except that Luoya removed Pei Tila's appearance. The dragon and the giant faced each other from afar. The atmosphere became more and more tense as time passed. Roar! The black-haired youth raised his head under the all-destroying dragon flames. His golden eyes lit up as if they were burning. His voice was calm as he recited his final trump card, which also changed the world. Under the impact of the curse, the origin substance of the crown trembled violently, and the crown stone exploded with a dazzling light. The figure of an ancient, destructive civilization flashed behind the young man, as if it had reappeared in the world. The moment he spoke, the scorched earth seemed to have been extinguished, and the sky began to change color. An explosive cold air rushed into the sky, freezing everything. Boom! The two completely different types of destruction consumed each other. A vortex of spell power was born between heaven and earth. The battle between the two of them was far beyond the level of an ordinary source grade 3. The entire arcane realm shook violently. The staff outside the arena panicked. The monitoring department was also in a mess. However, at the highest point of the arena, the white-haired old man who was watching the video did not stop the battle. Chapter 402. Williams had a dream. At that time, the girl didn't have powerful supernatural abilities. She wore a white dress and played with Sister Teresa on the grass. She was as lively and free as most children of her age. They walked through the garden and played in the palace. Heavy and ugly, the girl didn't want to wear such things, but for the prophecy 1,000 years ago, for the mission of her family, she still reached out her hand. "What are you going to do?" Hearing the question in her ear, the girl looked at the black-haired and golden-eyed child who appeared out of nowhere. After thinking for a moment, she answered, "No, that kind of thing, I don't need it." Everything nearby gradually glowed in her footsteps and finally disappeared. "Are you awake?" In the final confrontation, Williams's heart sword and Luo Ya's frozen earth power conflicted. Under the two different forces, neither side had any means of defense. The only choice was to attack with all their might. Both of them knew that whoever smashed all the others' substitute curse vessels first would win the final victory. The long sword in the armored knight's hand cut deeply into the boy's shoulder, and the blood splattered on his cheek. On the other side, Luo Ya's hand touched Williams's armor and completely froze it. However, even if both sides had caused excessive damage to each other, Williams knew that she had lost. At the last moment when the sword cut into her body, Luo Ya endured great pain and froze her blood. Williams's full blow was sealed at this point. The frost froze the girl's body along the sword and Luo Ya's palm. Williams didn't regain her consciousness until the boy retracted it. The outcome was settled. Looking at the pale boy, Williams had a complicated thought. She didn't know why she wasn't annoyed, but she felt a little relieved. On the viewing platform, the officials of Pender were dumbfounded. Antonio smiled and didn't say anything. And in the corner, the pink-haired girl was excitedly wiping the corners of her eyes. She knew that the moment his identity was exposed, William's fate had already changed. Looking at the girl's heroic and delicate face at this moment, Luo Ya's golden eyes widened slightly, then she smiled helplessly. "What is it?" "Gender is not important to me. My goal is to complete my mission. But when it comes to stubbornness, you are the one. You should cherish yourself more." "Heh, that's true. No matter how I think about it, the name Williams is fake. What's your real name?" "Wilhelmina." "Well then, Wilhelmina Coburnat, as the victor of the duel and the successor of the Auld family, I solemnly inform you that the task of the vow is over. You don't need to sacrifice anymore. You can take off your heavy armor, and you don't need to hide your true face anymore. Your fate is no longer dependent on me, and everything doesn't have to go according to plan. You are free. From now on, your life will belong to you." Hearing Luo Ya's calm words, the young girl's eyes slowly widened. Thousands of emotions surged into her heart in an instant. She wanted to say something, but she didn't know what to say. "I don't want to change anything." "I see." The girl who listened to his suggestion smiled. In the next moment, the two figures disappeared in the light and returned to the familiar battle arena. Chapter 403. In the dazzling light, the black-haired boy and the armored girl returned to Leinster's arena. Both of their substitute curse vessels were damaged. They were exhausted and scarred. However, what they didn't expect was that they were greeted with deafening applause and cheers that had never been seen in the arena before. Whether it was Luo Ya's use of ancient mystic arts to forcibly break the level limit, William's bloodline materialization, or the battle between the giant dragon and the giant, everything was too shocking. In the end, Williams exposed his true form, which brought a hint of romance to the battle, making countless girls in the audience excited. After the mythical battle, the final winner was not Williams, who was Source Level 3, but Luo Ya, who was Source Level 4. This result was also unprecedented. Before this, there had never been a Source Level 4 victory over Source Level 3 in the Challenger Cup. If this battle was an exciting war blockbuster in the eyes of ordinary people, then in the eyes of these professionals, it was a popular science video. No matter who it was, even the powerful Antonio would gain something in such a battle. In the arena, Luo Ya slowly retracted the frozen earth, and Williams also let go of the sword hilt. Then the medical staff of the competition swarmed up and performed emergency treatment on the two. It's not even a fatal wound. There's nothing to be afraid of. Instead, it's the side effect. I hope it doesn't come too soon. The championship is not over after the battle. I have to receive the award later. Quick, stop the bleeding. At the request of the medical staff, Luoya, who wanted to leave the arena by himself, could only lie down and be sent away. Until Luoya and Williams left the arena, the cheers in the arena finally subsided slowly. After the final between Luoya and Williams ended, the arena entered a short preparation time. Various shows were performed in the arena for the audience to pass the time. After nearly an hour of waiting, the Challenger Cup finally entered the awarding stage. This was also the reason why more than 100 contestants were invited today. Amidst this respectful and courteous reception, the thick and heavy doors of the battle arena opened once again. The crimson-red carpet flowed like a river towards the towering rostrum. The ceremonial soldiers armed to the teeth entered in 2 rows, standing on both sides of the carpet to form a corridor. When the girl appeared, there were enthusiastic cheers and applause in the arena. In the face of so many supportive audience, Williams also waved his hand, which set off another climax in the arena. After that, Teresa, Xia Luot, and the others entered the arena one by one. The tall Gelt, the mysterious and elegant Juliana, the steady gray Rose Edward, and the highly popular top 8 contestants led more than 100 contestants into the arena. Many of the spectators, especially the Leinster locals, had watched the Challengers Cup more than once. With a lot of experience, they knew that this year's Challengers Cup was far more exciting than the previous years. The biggest difference was the participation of the younger generation of the country of knights, which brought too many surprises to the spectators of various countries. In the cheers of the Golden Year, more than 100 contestants came to the official viewing platform. The representatives of the schools and the higher-ups of the academies came one by one with different badges in their hands and handed over the medals that represented honor to the contestants. At this time, Luoya was dressed in formal attire. After a round of emergency treatment, the wounds on the young man's body had healed, but the lost blood and spell power could not be replenished immediately. Antonio looked at Luoya, who still looked a little pale. He stretched out his hand and cast a few spells. Under the light, the young man looked a little better. The smiling dean also began his speech to the audience. Chapter 404. On the hospital bed, the black-haired teenager was slightly stunned when he heard the system prompt. He didn't expect that at the last moment when the blessing of the goddess of fate was about to expire, it would actually work again. Ding! At the celebration banquet, silently stare at Williams for more than 15 seconds at a time when the other party is aware of it. Looking at the new suggestion, the black-haired teenager's expression became strange. Although according to past experience, Luoya would follow the suggestion, he had to admit that the suggestion this time was a little impolite. It was fine if it was a guy, but a girl? No, staring for 15 seconds, a guy seemed to be even worse. The goddess of fate suggestion was originally set to save Estrella. Although the teenager had encountered many accidents along the way, he basically got good results under her suggestion and steadily moved toward his goal. After winning the Challengers Cup, Luoya felt that it was time to end it. It was not uncommon for St. Freya Academy to hold a celebration after winning the Challengers Cup. It was even a tradition of the academy, so the relevant preparations had been made long ago. After 3 days of waiting, the students in the academy could not wait any longer. Before evening, the carriage specially prepared by the academy was waiting outside the Blue Hall. After dressing up, Luoya, who was wearing a formal dress, finally put down his trophy and went to the banquet venue accompanied by Paul and Gerlach. Looking at the students shouting and waving on both sides of the road, Luoya couldn't help but smile bitterly. At the same time, he felt the strong influence of the title of Challengers Cup champion among the young people. In this game, thousands of spectators became his supporters. The title of Challengers Cup champion and honorary baron of the 5 countries was brought to Shio with the officials and spectators of various countries returning home. The battle between him and Williams would become a classic in the hearts of tens of thousands of people and a topic of conversation in the future, further spreading his name. Winning the Challengers Cup champion would bring great prestige. This was already known to the world. This kind of prestige was not determined by unchangeable things such as birth, but by hard work and hard work. Therefore, it was recognized by people. However, it had to be said that this year, Luo Ye's popularity was even higher than the previous winners. It even exceeded his own expectations, especially in the Saint Maester theocracy. His reputation was like the sun in the sky. The black-haired boy thought helplessly. Then, he couldn't help but think of the task that Miss Angel had given him before she left. Now that he had successfully obtained the trophy, Luo Ye's task could be considered completed. All that was left was to pray that Nuo Air would proceed smoothly. The event had yet to officially begin, but the banquet hall was already bustling with noise and excitement. The contestants from St. Freya's Academy arrived one by one, and there was no lack of seated contestants among them. Luo Ye's arrival was very sudden. It was like throwing a stone into a calm lake, stirring up waves. After the nobles of the theocracy rushed over, Xia Luo was the first to come over and show concern for Luo Ye's health. The boy responded seriously, and the young lady, who had been worried for the past few days, finally felt relieved. Perhaps it was because of Lillian's lead, or perhaps it was because the Challengers Cup champion title had changed Green Rose Green's view of Luo Ye. This time, the second-year ring-bearer chatted with Luo Ye for a while, but their conversation was still a little stiff. On the other hand, Grey Rose Edwards' communication skills were much better. Well, now that the border is actively preparing for war, the benefits of the soldiers in various countries are increasing. There are too many graduates from Leinster, and the competition is too fierce, so the benefits are decreasing. Although Leinster's extraordinaires had a lot of research results, they were still in the rear. Compared to the front lines, it was naturally safer and more comfortable. Under such circumstances, if the benefits were still higher than the front lines, the number of high-ranking extraordinaires on the front lines would definitely decrease. Chapter 405. For Teresa, events such as banquets were troublesome. Therefore, when she was in Pender, Teresa always had a special spokesperson by her side who could read her words in real time. But in St. Freya Academy, where only the students themselves were allowed to enter, the pink-haired girl had a hard time communicating with others, especially when the person she was communicating with was a highly sought-after character. Looking at the notebook in front of him, the black-haired boy was stunned for a moment, then looked down at the girl who grabbed the hem of his shirt. After understanding the girl's difficulties, Luo Ye waved his hand to reject Paul and the others who were calling for him, then brought the pink-haired girl to sit at a table so that Teresa could write. Mr. Luo Ye, thank you for helping Williams. Maybe that is true, but it is also a fact that your help changed Williams' fate, so please accept my thanks as her sister. The black-haired boy turned his head to look at the knight who was surrounded by fans in the distance and sighed. The pink-haired girl could not help but blush. Teresa waved her hand to express her denial, then wrote with some guilt, "Is there a problem with that? Using her? This understanding is too strict, in my opinion. It is the opposite. Miss Teresa trusts my character, so she told me everything. Isn't that the case?" Hearing Luo Ye's question, the pink-haired girl widened her eyes slightly. She thought for a moment, then nodded with a blush on her cheeks. "Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Luo Ye. What should I do?" "About this, I'm afraid that Mr. Luo Ye will have to ask her personally." The students who were originally running around in a mess stopped talking and greeted Antonio, who was dressed up. Teacher Chris also looked radiant today. A group of teachers entered the banquet hall and walked to the end of the hall and to Luo Ye's side amidst applause. "Fortunately, I did not disappoint you. After all, there are not many opportunities to surprise the dean." Antonio's face was full of smiles as he sighed in admiration of the younger generation. Then, he solemnly announced the official start of St. Freya's celebration. At the same time, hundreds and thousands of cursed fireworks rose into the sky, and grand music played at the same time. From the banquet hall to the square outside, the excited students cheered continuously. The celebration was in the form of a meal. The food was provided by St. Freya Academy, and the drinks were paid for by Leinster City Hall. Under such circumstances, eating and drinking was inevitable, or rather, most of the celebrations in Shio were like this. Chapter 406. Under the moonlight, Luoya looked at the smiling girl in front of him. He thought for a while and called out her name softly. Yes, it's me. I don't really care about names, but if there's anything that needs to be changed, I think it's a good idea to start with this name. But even so, it's impossible to make everyone change their names all of a sudden. After all, it's been so many years. I want to start with those close to me. Luoya said and bowed to Wilhelmina. The girl looked away embarrassedly. The young man smiled and thought for a while before asking a serious question. No, we plan to stay here. I say, do you not welcome us? The black-haired young man waved his hand and explained. After hearing Wilhelmina's answer, he felt a lot more relaxed. No matter what the reason was, it was a fact that Wilhelmina had endured torturous training for him. It was also a fact that she was willing to sacrifice herself for him. Although it was all arranged by the ancestors of the Auld family, Luoya, the beneficiary, couldn't be indifferent. As for Brittany, he had an agreement with her. She had a close relationship with his subordinate, Gerlach, and would probably join the consulting department in the future. He didn't have much contact with Stuart, but Luoya had a few words with him. At least their communication was friendly. Of course, there was a more important reason. Luoya felt that the country of knights was too isolated. The descendants of the Twilight Sage Association were rare talents. They had the potential to become the strongest in Xia. No matter if it was fame or resources, they deserved more. The Golden Generation? Indeed, reputation is important to knights. But the main reason why we're staying here is because of you. Of course. After all, the third prophecy exists. Although you said that it's no longer effective and you don't want to leave, we're still worried about leaving you here alone. It's not just me. The 7 of us made this decision together. After hearing this, Luoya blinked in surprise. Suddenly, he felt warmth in his heart. On the other hand, the girl hesitated for a long time and brought up the old topic again. Yes, I can. Are you not welcoming me with this reaction? Speaking of which, isn't this similar to how I was before? No, I'm just a little surprised. Speaking of which, why did you suddenly join? Yeah, I agree with that. Luoya's prophecy was naturally not the 3 prophecies about himself, but the prophecy of Wendy Ald's prophecy about the alliance of the 3 races 1,000 years ago, which was the so-called prophecy of destruction. Wilhelmina's 3rd prophecy about Luoya had failed, so she was a little optimistic about the prophecies of her ancestors. But Luoya, who knew the truth, did not dare to let his guard down. Strictly speaking, all 3 prophecies were correct. Luoya personally felt that the possibility was not high. Difficulties existed, but they were definitely not a dead end. This was the experience that Luoya had summed up after many years of struggle. But it had to be said that this time, the difficulty was a little big. Perhaps they would need more strength and more preparation to overcome it. For this reason, Luoya wanted to propose some suggestions. Min, what is Minna? Don't randomly call other people by their names. No, it's not that I dislike it, it's just that I'm not used to it. Speaking of which, who are the other people you're talking about? It's Nua Iyer and the others. I want them to join as well. After hearing Luoya's suggestion, Wilhelmina fell into a rare silence. Obviously, she was a little conflicted about the girls around Luoya. Seeing this, she said, no matter if it's the Theocracy or Rose, they are all big countries under Xia. They shouldn't drag down the Knight's country. Instead, they should be able to complement each other. Of course, I understand your worries. They might not believe in a prophecy without any evidence. But fortunately, I have some influence in the Theocracy and Rose. Under Luoya's persuasion, the girl finally relented a little. She looked at the young man with a serious expression and said, well, I understand that. The others may not be able to do it, but I think they can. The 4 of them had no problem in terms of stance or willingness, so Luoya could ask the girls to join without hesitation. However, Luoya didn't want to involve the others who were close to Luoya. As the protagonist team in the original work, Luoya estimated that they wouldn't be able to escape in the future. Everyone was doing this for the future of mankind, and the final outcome was likely to be the same, so he wasn't in a hurry. Saving Estrid was Luoya's initial goal. According to Antonio, the knight's country didn't agree with his research on Dream of Chaos, fearing that it would lead to the awakening of the savior. However, Luo Ye, who had contact with Estrid in that era, knew that the two had nothing to do with each other. He had to save Estrid, but he was afraid that he would have to wait until Wilhelmina, Luo Ye, and the others had more say, and the right to speak was linked to strength, so in the end, he still had to have real ability. Luo Ye returned to the banquet hall first, while Wilhelmina went to put on her armor again. At this time, after Antonio and the other teaching staff left the hall, the originally reserved students started to have fun. The extraordinaries had a high degree of body mutation and had a strong endurance, so most of them were good at drinking. As the protagonist, Luo Ye was naturally dragged into the party. It was understandable that the knight's country had its customs, not to mention that as a member of the royal family, it was even more admirable to take the lead in following the chivalry and principles. With this reason, the firepower of the girls was greatly reduced, leaving only Luo Ye to charge. More than an hour later, Luo Ye finally finished dealing with all the excited students. The young man spent the rest of the time chatting with Xia Luot and the others until midnight, when the celebration officially ended. After the celebration, St. Freya's Academy entered a 2-day break. The indulgent students were able to adjust a little so that their normal lives would not be affected by the hangover. After 3 days of revelry, the whole city of Leinster finally exhausted the remaining excitement of the Challengers' Cup and gradually calmed down. As the tourists left, the merchants also entered a rest period after high-intensity work. The whole city seemed to have changed from young people dancing in nightclubs to middle-aged people soaking in goji berries in thermos cups. The biggest reward of the Challengers' Cup champion was naturally the influence brought by the reputation and the noble title of the 5 countries, but the material rewards were also equally rich, such as the commission of municipal taxes during the event. One of the reasons was naturally that with the development of the times, the people of various countries were getting richer. Another reason was the existence of transfer students from the knight's country, which led to more people coming to watch the competition, especially the nobles from Pender. Of course, the most important thing was that the competition was really exciting. How long had it been since the Challengers' Cup? It had only been a little more than 2 months, including the preparation before and after, and the tax revenue had exceeded the 1,000,000 gold coins mark. This was daylight robbery. Cities were just like people. If one wanted to be rich, there had to be something different. Perhaps it had to follow the tide of history, or it had to have some unique skills. Leinster was a typical city where educational resources were concentrated. It was unique and irreplaceable, and this accumulation began 1,000 years ago. The first school year lasted from the beginning of spring to autumn. The final exams had long ended before the Challengers' Cup began, and after the largest competition of the younger generation came to an end, the students of St. Freya's Academy finally welcomed the first school year break. The winter break and summer break were designed to avoid the coldest and hottest seasons, but the problem was that the students of St. Freya's Academy came from various countries. If it was really a semester system, many of them would have to go back and forth between home and the academy for half a year. Therefore, St. Freya's Academy's break was from the end of autumn of the first year to the beginning of spring of the second year. This half a year was more suitable for all the students, and at the beginning of the year, the nobles had to do and participate in many activities, such as leading the people in winter and various New Year's parties. Luo Ye, on the other hand, had other things to do, such as taking advantage of this last time to meet someone he would not be able to see for the next half a year. Lillian Akerman. Chapter 407. This year's first year at St. Freya Academy was a happy one to some extent, because most of the students had something to brag about when they returned home. This year at St. Freya Academy was a wonderful time that Paul's previous 10 years combined could not compare to. The young man's strength improved by leaps and bounds during this period. He stood out in the Challengers' Cup, the biggest stage for young people in Shia, and even won the medal of the top 32. Because of this honor, Paul's situation in the Austin Empire would be greatly improved, and the reason why he could get to where he was today, Paul knew very well that it was Luo Ye's help. And if this was a direct help, then in terms of indirect help, Luo Ya's influence was even greater. Therefore, at the end of the first year, Paul specially came to Luo Ya to express his gratitude, which made the black-haired young man feel a lot of emotions for a while. Once upon a time, Paul's existence was a thorn in Luo Ya's heart, which made him feel uneasy when he was young. But after actual contact, Luo Ya found that things were not as bad as he thought. Reality was not a game, and the relationship between people was not determined long ago, but could be changed. What you said is indeed the factor of my help, but in the end, I just provided you with a good environment. Whether it's enthusiastically helping your classmates or taking classes and training seriously every day, it's all your own hard work, so Paul, you can be more confident. I understand, Brother Luo Ya. At St. Freya Academy, it was not easy for Luo Ya to contact Lillian, even more so for a meeting without a proper reason, but this was nothing to Paul. Under such a disguise, no one would have thought that Paul's real job was actually a spy agent, the kind that arranged for leaders to meet. I didn't expect Senior Sister to choose to meet here, isn't it a little too revealing? Don't worry, I've already asked the Magician Legion to set up a barrier around here, the people outside can't see us. Hee, you miss it very much, right? Don't you think it's very suitable as the place where we met for the first time and the last time before the holidays? Luo Ya nodded as he listened to the girl's words. More than half a year ago, Luo Ya and Lillian had met here for the first time. They had looked at each other from afar and were ready to fight. At that time, Luo Ya was a problematic student in the eyes of Lillian, who was in charge of maintaining order. Luo Ya was always on guard against this genius of the Aikman family. Thinking about the same thing, the two looked at each other and smiled tacitly. The purple-eyed girl looked at the setting sun and lifted her hair by her ears as she sighed. You have to take care of yourself during this time. There shouldn't be any problems in the Austin Empire, right? This time, Lillian, who was originally the favorite to win the championship, didn't win the Challengers Cup. The girl also had two good brothers who couldn't wait for her to die. It was impossible for Luo Ya not to worry about her after being away for so long. Don't worry. I'm not at the point where I need you to worry about me. It's just a small matter. Lucas and Aubrey can't do anything to me. Besides, have you forgotten that there's Paul now? After getting a good ranking, my brothers will probably target him. So, although the pressure on my side seems to be great, it's actually less than in previous years. Luo Ya blinked in surprise after listening to Lillian's explanation. He didn't expect that the consequence of him helping Paul would be saving the country in a roundabout way. This time, when Paul returned to the country, some political adventurers and guys who liked to bet on both sides would probably find him. In addition, as a male, Paul's danger level in the eyes of his two brothers had risen sharply. He might even become their primary target. With this thought in mind, Luo Ya looked at Lillian and felt a little relieved. Then he informed the girl about the progress of Estrad's matter. Lillian, who heard that Wilhelmina was willing to move around the knight's country for this matter, breathed a sigh of relief and said that she was willing to help if necessary. For a long time, Lillian had a vague feeling that Emperor Lucas might know that she had the king's blood and had some understanding of the Akkad family. It's okay to investigate this, but Senior Sister must be careful. Emperor Lucas' ban is very strange. There might be a problem. After exhorting each other for a while, Luo Ya and Lillian reluctantly bid farewell. The young man's final matters in the academy were settled, and the day of his departure was getting closer and closer. After bidding farewell to Lillian, Luo Ya, who had a long journey, first began to prepare to return to his country. But before that, a certain beautiful teacher had something to discuss with Luo Ya. Ai Lizzie, who was also a member of the Akkad family, also came along. Long-distance relationships were difficult. Long-distance relationships were even more difficult when one party had not made a clear statement. It couldn't be helped. Ever since he fell out of love when he was a student and plunged into work, Chris had not been in a relationship for close to 20 years. The old 24K purebred single dog, coupled with the fact that he had become more mature as he got older, he was not as bold as he was when he was young. Ai Lizzie, I see that you have a good relationship with Luo Ya. How do you usually get close to him? Is that so? Then, is there any strategy to settle this once and for all? Settle this once and for all? It's better to drug him. Hearing the criminal plan that popped out of the girl's mouth, Chris was dumbfounded. However, Lizzie was unusually calm, as if she was talking about a trivial matter that was not worth mentioning. No, but most people would be angry about this kind of thing, right? At the same time, he was glad that Nua Iyer had gone back in advance. If Her Royal Highness had joined in, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Was she delayed by something? The black-haired boy thought as he looked at the scenery outside the window and fell into deep thought. Chapter 408. It was late autumn, and the temperature in Acate Hill began to drop. People who were engaged in agriculture became busy, and the merchants between the cities also stepped up their transportation before winter. The number of carriages and patrolling soldiers gradually increased, but most of them had smiles on their faces. As for the soldiers, Acate Hill's financial situation had improved in recent years, and the entire Shia army's salary had improved as a whole. The soldiers who were responsible for maintaining law and order naturally had their salaries increased. Of course, there was another news that spread to Acate City with Luo Ya's return. That was the news that the boy won the Challengers Cup. This news was also explosive. Even in Acate Hill, which was far away from the kingdom of scholars, many people knew the importance of this award and the honor it represented after hundreds of years of publicity. People were flowing on both sides of the road, and the whole city was decorated with lanterns and streamers. When Luo Ya, who had just arrived in the city, saw such a scene, the boy thought it was a coincidence that there was a festival. Later, when Anna came to greet him, he finally realized that this was specially prepared to welcome him. You misunderstood, young master. Although this event was prepared by the mansion, the people came spontaneously. Most of the expenses were paid by us. Everyone welcomes your return from the bottom of their hearts. The announcement of the celebration has been released a week in advance, so it did not affect normal business activities, nor did it cause traffic congestion. Moreover, the expansion of the city gate that you left behind before you left has been completed, so the side gate is enough to deal with emergencies. 1 second. Remember, after listening to Anna's explanation, the boy couldn't help but nod. After thinking for a moment, he stood on the carriage and waved to the crowd. The people on both sides saw this and cheered. Looking at the excited response and the smiling people, Luo Ya's exhaustion from a month of travel was swept away, and his heart was unprecedentedly warm. The black-haired boy arrived at the familiar mansion under the warm welcome of the people. Looking at the door in front of him that was opened by the servants, Luo Ya felt a lot of emotions. Due to Xia Luo's status as the fiancé, Lizzie, who couldn't win against the young lady, had no choice but to retreat strategically and switch from offense to defense. On the other side, it was rare for Xia Luo to not be obstructed by her old enemy, Iyer. She also seized the opportunity to attack, and this was reflected in the fact that Luo Ya's carriage had become the busiest place in the entire convoy, with the two girls repeatedly entering and exiting it. The second half of the journey was pretty good after the girls stopped fighting. Luo Ya even took out 2 days to go hunting with the two of them. However, the process of hunting made the youth quite speechless. However, when it came to Xia Luo and Lizzie, the hunting became a demonstration of their skills. The reddish-brown-haired girl closed her eyes and threw a gold coin on the map to mark the hunting area. Then, Lizzie released a silver bird to scout the area, and finally, a spell was cast to settle it. Luo Ya wasn't surprised by the girl's achievements, but to the soldiers and guards, the two girls' abilities were quite amazing. After a series of operations, the team was overflowing with joy. Facing the proud girls who came to show off their achievements, Luo Ya could only praise them. Originally, the young lady wanted to accompany Luo Ya all the way to Acate Hill, but Luo Ya unexpectedly sent a letter urging them to hurry up. Both Luo Ya and Xia Luo were a little puzzled, but then the girl seemed to remember something. After comforting Luo Ya, she left in advance. In fact, Luo Ya was the same. When they were a week away from Acate Hill, a messenger in the convoy left in advance to inform Dia. For the two who rarely spent time together, this holiday was a rare opportunity to get together. Life in St. Freya's academy may be colorful for him. The glory of being the champion of the Challengers Cup also made him unparalleled in the limelight in Leinster, but these were not important to Luoya. Luoya liked the smell of paper and ink in the study of Akate Mansion. He liked the afternoon sunset in the bedroom where he grew up. He liked the refreshing tea that Anna brewed for him in the early morning. Perhaps these were not worth mentioning in the eyes of others, but to him, they were a portrayal of his daily life and a peaceful place to belong. Leaning against the back of the chair in the dining room, Luoya carefully tasted the black tea in his mouth. Behind him, Anna stood quietly in her maid uniform, telling the young man about the progress of Akate Hill. The silver-haired girl sat quietly by the side and listened. Before Luoya knew the details, Ai Lizzie wanted to hear the young man's honest evaluation from the heart. This was also an important reference for the girl to measure her value because Ai Lizzie could not accept that she was useless to her brother. Chapter 409. In the dining hall of Akate Mansion, the black-haired boy frowned as he listened to the maid's words. Beside him, Ai Lizzie also put down her teacup in surprise. Her heart was filled with questions. For a long time, Nuair had attached great importance to the exchange of letters with Luoya. Every month she would send 2 letters. This was a mandatory task that Nuair had put forward. There was no limit to the number of letters. It was said that it was necessary to ensure safety. Of course, most of the content had nothing to do with safety. It could be said that Nuair relied on a long time of persistent correspondence to suppress Ai Lizzie's many schemes. Every weekend, when the letter from the Holy Capital arrived, Ai Lizzie would grit her teeth, but there was nothing she could do. Because of this, Nuair attached great importance to letters. Needless to say, Luoya's birthday, even if it was an ordinary holiday, they would still write to greet her. This time, the boy had won the Challengers Cup and returned, bringing glory to the entire Saint Maester Empire. How could Nuair not write a letter to congratulate her? The reason Nuair returned early this time was because of the awakening of her bloodline. Considering the safety issues and the many possible consequences, this matter had not spread. Adhering to the principle of keeping secrets, Luoya didn't even tell Ai Lizzie, so the girl didn't know about it. However, Luoya, who knew, was very worried. Writing a letter obviously didn't require a lot of energy or physical strength. Nuair couldn't be indifferent after learning that Luoya had won the championship. She would write a congratulatory letter no matter what, but under such circumstances, the boy didn't receive a letter. Could it be that something happened to Nuair? Young master, there is indeed no letter from Nuair in the recent period of time, but this is very likely due to the traffic in the Holy Capital. That's right. Because winter is coming soon, the Holy Capital is organizing an accelerated autumn harvest to make the last supply run to Tucker Fortress. During this period of time, the traffic over there is rather chaotic, so it's inevitable that the letters will be delayed. Hearing Anna's words, the black-haired youth who didn't know much about the situation in the Holy Capital finally heaved a sigh of relief. After thinking for a while, he decided to wait. In theory, Nuair's safety was guaranteed once they entered the theocracy. In the country where the Vatican was located, there was no force that could threaten Nuair, nor was there any force that dared to do so. Any cult that dared to do so would have been eradicated 1,000 years ago. Although there was something wrong with Earl Eric's family, Heathcliff and the Akate family were currently in an alliance. Brian wouldn't dare to act rashly, and from the perspective of benefits, attacking Nuair was meaningless. Moreover, even if these were not mentioned in terms of influence alone, if the Eric family had really revealed their true intentions, the church would have been in chaos long ago. How could it still be so calm? No, it's nothing. It's itchy. In the current situation where there was a serious lack of information, in theory, there was no need to be overly worried. Luoya did have a bad feeling in his heart, but the youth didn't want to affect the atmosphere at home and make Ai Lizzie, who had just returned home, nervous. In the next few days, Luoya and Ai Lizzie entered a period of recuperation after a long journey. They didn't go out much. After a series of battles in the Challengers Cup, the youth had a deeper understanding of his own strength, and he had the idea of advancing to a higher level. On the other hand, Luoya also made arrangements for Nuair. The youth didn't passively wait for news. Instead, he ordered the Akate family's intelligence personnel to set off on the first night to investigate the situation in the holy capital. Kadia came back. Chapter 410. The news of Kadia's return was a big deal for both the Akate family and Luoya. The logistics department, this seemingly inconspicuous department that was often looked down upon by new recruits who didn't know much about military affairs, was actually very important in a war. A unit might dare to say that they could defend any place for 10 days, but no one dared to say that they could go without food or water for 10 days. Morale was something that couldn't be seen or touched, but it was the common goal of countless famous generals since ancient times. There were many ways to raise morale. For example, a winning streak could cultivate pride, loyalty could be cultivated through years of service, and even rewards could increase morale to a certain extent. However, to maintain morale, food supplies were indispensable. Luoya had seen throughout the history of 2 wars. The only army that could withstand all unfavorable conditions and still maintain a high level of cohesion, combat effectiveness, and morale was the army under the red flag. However, even those great men had always strived to fill their stomachs. After the news of Kadia's return to Akate City spread, the mansion could be said to be filled with jubilation. After Kadia, Luoya, and even Ai Lizi left one after another, Akate Mansion was deserted for a long time due to the absence of their masters. Even the servants were a little uncomfortable, and the family's chef had been unemployed for half a year. Under Anna's leadership, the Akate Mansion underwent a long period of cleaning and decorating. The furniture, armrests, and other items that were prone to defects were repaired. Antique decorations were also moved out of the warehouse and placed in the corridor. A bright red carpet was laid out all the way to the streets. As for Akate City, Luoya ordered a welcoming event to be held. Remember, on the other hand, Kadia didn't return alone. There were thousands of soldiers in Akate City accompanying him. These people were specially transferred by Kadia to his side so that they could go home. This action won him a lot of prestige, and the families of the soldiers in the city were very excited. As the procession walked through the gate, the crowd was filled with excited shouts. Women were calling their husbands' names, children were waving to their fathers, and more family members were following the procession. In front of the square, Luoya and Ai Lizi were already waiting for them. Of course, the girl wouldn't say what she was thinking. Luoya had always thought that Ai Lizi was standing like this because she was his adopted child. When she was young, Luoya even talked to her about it. However, Ai Lizi firmly refused to change her position, and as time passed, Luoya got used to it. A few years had passed, and as an extraordinary, Kadia's appearance didn't change much. However, probably because of his frequent visits to the battlefield, his aura had become sharper, and the pressure he gave off had also increased. On the other side, Luoya and Ai Lizi also hurried forward to greet their elder politely. "Father, welcome home." "No, not at all." In front of everyone, Luoya and Ai Lizi bowed to Kadia in a standard manner, displaying the nobility's image to the extreme, causing the passers-by to exclaim in amazement. Meanwhile, Kadia looked back and forth at the two who cooperated well with each other and smiled. "Of course. When father wasn't around, Ai Lizi helped me a lot. And no matter what has happened, Ai Lizi will always be an important family member to me." Upon hearing Luoya's words, the silver-haired girl couldn't help but widen her eyes. Although Ai Lizi knew what Luoya was trying to say, this confession still made her blush and her heart palpitate. For the past 6 months, most of the people in Akate residence had been worried that Luoya wouldn't be able to resist the temptation and would abandon the silver-haired girl who had grown up with him. However, in Kadia's eyes, it was the exact opposite. This patriarch of the Akate family, who had led the Akate family for decades, wasn't worried about Luoya. Instead, he was worried about Ai Lizi. Ai Lizi could be said to be the most talented person Kadia had ever met in his life. In fact, she even exceeded his understanding. Even Princess Nuire was slightly inferior to Ai Lizi. This was because Ai Lizi was younger, and in terms of appearance, Ai Lizi was often breathtaking and almost flawless. Chapter 411. In the dining hall of the Akat mansion, the black-haired boy looked at Ka Dia, who had just returned from the holy capital, hoping to get some information from his father. However, to his surprise, Ka Dia didn't give any answer to Luo Ya's question. Yes, before leaving he specifically told me to win the championship. Hearing Luo Ya's words, Ka Dia pushed the topic aside and didn't specifically ask about the reason for Nuo Ayer's discomfort. At the same time, he looked at Luo Ya with a deeper gaze. As the saying goes, loyalty and filial piety are difficult to achieve at the same time. If Ka Dia insisted on getting involved in this matter, Luo Ya would definitely fall into a dilemma because he didn't know how to answer. Therefore, as a father, Ka Dia simply took the initiative to brush it aside. Ka Dia was actually very satisfied with this result. After all, in his opinion, as a frontline general, for the current theocracy, unity and stability were the most important. Because everyone was lost in their own thoughts, there was a rare silence at the Akat family's dining table. Seeing this, the silver-haired girl took the initiative to start a topic. Ka Dia was taken aback when he heard this, but after thinking for a moment, he smiled and said, "I'll remember it in 1 second." Ka Dia shook his head and explained the reason for Luo Ya and the others. Logistical supply seemed easy, but in fact, it was a military operation with high requirements for discipline. During this process, the soldiers must march as quickly as possible under the premise of maintaining vigilance to reduce the loss of food on the way. Moreover, the team's reconnaissance ability was also very high. But it had to be said that even such conditions were only achieved after several years of road repairs led by Ka Dia. Otherwise, it would be a magical journey for most of the human armies to travel to the eastern region. In the case where there was no road, it was very likely that they would get lost. And getting lost in the desolate eastern region would often result in complete annihilation. In the past, Luo Ya only knew that Ka Dia was busy for the peace of the theocracy and even the human world. However, the youth did not know the specifics, and Ka Dia had never mentioned it. However, it seemed that after returning and learning that Luo Ya had won the Challengers Cup championship and feeling that his child had grown up, the Marquis finally opened his mouth. In the past, as the successor of the Akat family, Luo Ya did not need such knowledge and experience to revitalize the territory. However, the Challengers Cup had changed Luo Ya's position. As an active general who was familiar with the situation in the eastern region, Ka Dia was now deliberately explaining to him so that he could be mentally prepared. It could be said that he had put in a lot of effort. Luo Ya was not the only student in Ka Dia's class, but also Ai Lizi. In fact, in Ka Dia's eyes, Ai Lizi was the one with potential who had yet to show her strength. With the girl's talent, once she entered St. Freya Academy and entered the public's eyes, she would definitely become one of the future hopes of mankind. It was beneficial to supplement her knowledge in advance. Anna, the trophy. At Luo Ya's command, the maids respectfully brought the Challengers Cup inlaid with a pedestal to Ka Dia. The Marquis looked at the trophy that he was fortunate to see once decades ago, and his face flushed with excitement. That failure had a great impact on Ka Dia, making him more diligent in his youth. After a few years, he finally made a breakthrough in his extraordinary power. To a certain extent, the Challengers Cup was a competition that stimulated Ka Dia's ambition. Reaching out and stroking the 56 precious and small gems on the trophy, the middle-aged man's heart was filled with pride. He was happier than if he had won the prize himself, especially when he saw the words and signature on the back of the trophy. These words are only for the winner of the 56 Challengers Cup. Good, very good. By the way, Father, Teacher Chris may come to visit in a few days. She is an old acquaintance of yours from the academy, right? I wonder if it's convenient for you to meet her? The middle-aged man replied resolutely to Luo Ya's question. On the other side, Luo Ya and Ai Lizi looked at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. No matter how good their relationship with Teacher Chris was, they had to respect their father's opinion. This was the bottom line of Luo Ya and Ai Lizi as children. Fortunately, Ka Dia's impression of Chris was better than expected. Coupled with the bonus of the Challengers Cup championship, this might really be a chance. I understand, brother. Leave it to me. Silently cheering for their teacher in their hearts, Luo Ya and Ka Dia talked about their experiences in the competition for a while. It was late at night when the three of them returned to their rooms to rest. In the next few days, Luo Ya reported the progress of his extraordinary power to Ka Dia, and the progress he reported surprised the Marquis. Yes, I can be sure of this. Especially after the Challengers Cup, this feeling of saturation has become more and more obvious. In the past, Luo Ya's fast advancement speed could be attributed to his family's bloodline awakening late. However, Luo Ya had only been at source rank 4 for less than 2 years. It was indeed beyond common sense for him to advance so quickly. Thinking of this, Ka Dia's gaze changed a little when he looked at Luo Ya. Just like Shiya's law, great power was inevitably accompanied by a corresponding price. Luo Ya's extraordinary power advancement was godly, so the risks he experienced were far from what ordinary people could compare to. However, these youngsters had never mentioned this to him. If Luo Ya had not understood things on his own when he was young, and if Luo Ya had not overcome many difficulties without guidance, Ka Dia might have regretted it for the rest of his life. Although there were countless high-level extraordinaires who had died at the hands of Luo Ya, this did not mean that Luo Ya was stronger than them in all aspects. In fact, most of Luo Ya's leapfrogging kills were done in the historical fragments. In the historical fragments, the ancient gods could slightly exceed Luo Ya's level and display greater strength. Under such circumstances, Luo Ya wanted to find an experienced high-level extraordinaire to guide him, and Ka Dia, as a veteran powerhouse of the second level of source rank, was simply the most suitable candidate. Through the explanation, Luo Ya also discovered the gap between himself and Ka Dia. While listening to the lecture, Luo Ya also understood Ka Dia's strength to a certain extent. If he guessed correctly, Ka Dia was probably a considerable expert of the second level of source rank. It was no wonder that he could become the chief of the conjurers. Moreover, according to his father, he had even defeated an expert from the kingdom of knights, Count Bastet's family, in the exchange competition between the two armies. After a few days of continuous teaching, the youngster found a direction to move forward. He once again entered the library to read, and at the same time, patiently waited for teacher Chris's arrival. However, although the plan was perfect, the changes were a step faster. Before teacher Chris arrived at Akkad territory, a convoy full of goods had arrived ahead of time. In the hall of the Akkad mansion, servants were carefully carrying all kinds of exquisitely packaged boxes and opening them one by one to verify the items inside. Because the news of Luo Ya's victory was too sudden, the nobles of the theocracy were basically unprepared. However, as a group that had experienced countless events, the nobles also had a way of dealing with such matters. That was, they wrote congratulatory letters first and sent gifts later. As the recipient of the letters, Luo Ya also had his own tasks. On one hand, he had to write a reply letter after receiving the gifts. On the other hand, he had to evaluate the value of the gifts and record them down. On the next birthday, he had to send a gift of equal value or slightly higher than the other parties. Marquis Bafaz's house, a whole intact golden bearskin tapestry, decorative type, worth about 3,500 gold coins. Duke Lucen's house, 12 Deer Forest, decorative type, one of the representative works of the great painter Viking more than 200 years ago, worth about 5,000 gold coins. On the sofa, Luo Ya looked at the rare treasures one by one, sipping tea while listening to Anna's explanation. However, when it came to a small wooden box engraved with the emblem of the Heathcliff family, Anna's voice suddenly stopped. After a moment of silence, Anna came to Luo Ya with the box in her hand. The youngster's heart skipped a beat. He put down the teacup and looked inside. In the center of the mythical painting of the Holy See, a ring engraved with the emblem of the Heathcliff family was lying quietly on a precious red silk cloth. The moment Luo Ya saw the ring, his golden pupils suddenly shrank. The youngster reached out his hand to take the box and carefully looked at it. His face couldn't help but change, and his eyes flashed. Holy See, John wants me to meet him? The youngster frowned and walked towards Ka Dia's room. Chapter 412. Not everyone in Shia could have a ring with the family emblem on it, because the family emblem represented authority, and giving it away was equivalent to giving away part of that authority. Although the Akot family and Heathcliff family were allies, and Luoya had a good relationship with Old John, the boy was not narcissistic enough to think that Old John would give him the family emblem, and it was even more impossible that Old John would give him the family emblem. Although John of the Holy See was old, he was not an idiot. As an extraordinary, the older he got, the wiser he became. There must be a reason for his actions, and the most likely reason was to ask Luoya to take the ring to him. After thinking about it for a while, Luoya roughly understood John of the Holy See's intention. As proof, Luoya also found a congratulatory letter from Heathcliff, and a sentence in the letter immediately caught the boy's attention after receiving the ring. Under the guidance of glory? This is really the symbol of glory. Well, he probably wants you to go there, but I don't know what the Holy See wants you to do. What mission is it? Or is it? It's very likely. In that case, it's better for you to leave early. Your teacher will be here soon, so you can use this as a cover. Chris was not just any random person. He was one of the few sage teachers in the scholar nation. His future achievements in the education system were limitless. He was a great scholar that no one could invite. Normally, when a teacher of this level came to visit, the other noble families would at least gather everyone to show their respect, even if they did not welcome him with gongs and drums. Calculating the time, there were about 2 days before teacher Chris's arrival. After discussing with his father, Luoya decided to wait for the right time. Since John of the Holy See notified Luoya in this way, the requirement for secrecy was obviously higher than the speed of going there. Although Luoya didn't know what he would experience after going to the holy capital, one thing he knew was that he had to have the ability to adapt. In order to prevent any accidents, Luoya first gathered the pagan army of Akot territory. Since they hadn't been in Akot territory for a long time and hadn't fought in the country, the pagan legion didn't attract too much attention. Their identity as mercenaries was the best cover for them. The only one that could cause trouble for them was the Holy See. But in Saint Maester theocracy, which church would dare to cause trouble for Luoya? Under such circumstances, no one with a normal level of intelligence would bother Luoya. In fact, when they were in the north, the people of the Holy See had turned a blind eye to the measures taken by the Akot family. Of course, although no one would cause trouble for them, the concealment of the pagan army wasn't up to standard. The most important thing for them to go to the holy capital was concealment. Fortunately, Luoya had some ways to deal with this. The Sorofia Chamber of Commerce in Saint Maester theocracy was the most important area of the Sorofia family other than Luoya's main store. The president of the Sorofia Chamber of Commerce in the holy capital, Alvin, was an old friend of Luoya. At that time, Alvin was optimistic about Luoya's future influence in the theocracy and provided him with a lot of help. After the marriage between Luoya and Xia Luo was announced, President Alvin looked at Luoya as if he had seen a treasure. During the holidays, he would think of ways to send gifts to him. During the development of Akot territory, he also contributed a lot. Every year from late autumn to early winter was the peak period for the various chambers of commerce. A large number of crops needed to be transported to the city to provide for the needs of the people in the city during winter. In order to speed up the circulation and stabilize the prices, several large chambers of commerce had signed an agreement with the theocracy. Under such circumstances, in order to make up for the low sales and transportation costs of the chambers of commerce, the theocracy issued a 2-month pass. The purpose of this pass was to reduce customs duties, reduce customs procedures, and exempt from searches. This was what Luoya needed the most right now. After thinking for a while, the black-haired youth sorted out a plan and began to prepare in an orderly manner. Time passed little by little as Luoya's preparations were completed, until Chris's arrival. Chapter 4:13. A month's time? Perhaps it was because Luoya's expression was too solemn, or perhaps it was because Arvin himself had confidence in the Holy See, the middle-aged man added after this sentence. Well, I understand. Thank you for your help, President Arvin. The middle-aged businessman responded to Luoya's gratitude with a smile. His amiable look made people like him even more. The black-haired young man shook his head and sighed at the wily old fox. At the same time, he felt a little relieved. Nuair was the princess of a country. If something happened to her, too many people would be implicated. It was almost impossible to hide it. Since the Sorofia family said that nothing major happened to the Holy See, then the situation with Nuair must still be under control. Luoya had the system, so he did not suffer much in the aspect of bloodline. However, many ordinary extraordinaries had to endure great risks and pain to upgrade their bloodline. Being bedridden for a month was already considered good. There was even the risk of failing the upgrade and losing their lives. If it were someone else in this situation, Luoya would probably think it was normal to not see him for 3 months, let alone 1 month. After all, compared with the power brought by the golden bloodline, anything was possible. However, everything was different when this person was a blonde angel. With a silent sigh, the black-haired young man entered the Chamber of Commerce to rest under the guidance of President Arvin. At the same time, he quietly waited for the arrival of the knight. With the royal family emblem ring, one could indeed meet John of the Holy See directly. However, if the operation was carried out secretly, it would naturally involve methods and methods. In the Holy City, the entire Holy See and the various departments of the palace had dozens of different organizations. Some of them were well known, while others were obscure. However, if Luoya wanted to meet John of the Holy See in secret, there was only one choice. The Inquisition, the headquarters of the judges. Most of the people in it were fierce, but they were also some of the most devout people because they were the warriors on the front line of the battle against the cultists. As part of the church's regular army, the inquisitors faced far more danger than the ordinary army of any country. Ordinary soldiers fought on the battlefield, but to the inquisitors, they lived every moment of their lives on the battlefield. The number of inquisitors who died on the battlefield might not be more than the number of inquisitors who were assassinated silently in their daily lives. This was the consensus of the Inquisition. Every year, there would be new inquisitors who died outside of the battlefield due to carelessness. But even so, there would always be more inquisitors. Luoya had a very high respect for these warriors who had silently contributed in the darkness. Some of them had concealed their identities and were reclusive. Some of them had sinister and distorted faces because of the vicious curses. However, the nobility of the soul couldn't be limited by the physical body. In Luoya's eyes, they were all light. Only in such a place could he be assured to come. The Inquisition was an organization directly under the Holy See and was directly responsible to the Holy See. Moreover, the inquisitors in the Inquisition were all military personnel. The importance of military secrets far exceeded that of other departments. If Luoya was John of the Holy See, he would definitely instruct the people here to contact him. The Inquisition was different from other organizations of the Holy See. There was no one guarding the entrance. In other words, there were no visible guards at the entrance. Sir, please state your name, show me the relevant items that can prove your identity, and tell me the purpose of your visit. The young man said as he took off his hood and took out the identification card that he had prepared in advance. As he expected, the inquisitor at the entrance didn't show any surprise at Luoya's arrival. In fact, when Luoya heard his name, the inquisitor let down his guard. Yes. Today was different from the past. After winning the Challengers Cup, Luoya's influence had skyrocketed. He had already become one of the representatives of the Holy Mestre Empire. His relationship with the royal family was also very close. It could be said that he was an upstart in the current era, and it was obvious that Luoya had already discovered them. If the young man spoke, even the inquisitors who were used to seeing storms and waves wouldn't be able to continue monitoring him. As time passed, the feeling of being watched by the young man gradually subsided. Not long after, the guard at the entrance returned and led Luoya into the depths of the Inquisition. The two of them passed through rooms and corridors one after the other, finally arriving at a dark room lit only by a lamp. In the depths of the room, a red-haired man calmly looked at Luoya with a serious expression. "Thank you for your kindness, Count Hanks. Please forgive me for my sudden visit. I have long heard of your great name, and it is my honor to meet you." As the person in charge of an important position in the Inquisition, although Hanks was one of the most important ministers of the Holy Mestre, he rarely appeared in public. In fact, this young man not only held a position in the Holy Mestre, but he was also a noble in the palace, and his title was a count. In just a short sentence, Luoya let the suspicious head of the Inquisition feel the full trust of the royal family of Hezecrete. Hanks, who noticed this, changed his attitude slightly. He stood up and shook hands with Luoya. "Yes, sir." "Yes, it is a promise brought by a ring." "I understand." "Then, Lord Luoya, please come with me." An hour later, Luoya secretly went to a familiar but unexpected place under Hanks' arrangement, the palace of the Holy Mestre Empire. If the meeting was in the headquarters of the Holy Mestre, then Hardadef would be the Holy See, and Luoya would be facing a secret official mission. But if the meeting was in the palace, then Hardadef would be the king and the head of the family of Hezecrete, and this meeting would be more of a private one. The palace of Saint Lorraine was well maintained this year. Legend said that the building, which had the same color as the feathers of angels, was as holy as ever in the winter night. The red-haired head of the Inquisition, Hanks, led Luoya into the empty palace. The guards around them had obviously been replaced by members of the Inquisition. From the perspective of having a close relationship with the royal family, Hanks, as a noble in the palace, should be close to Luoya. But for more than an hour, Luoya felt that Hanks was observing him more, and even a little wary of him. This word appeared in the youth's mind and he raised his eyebrows, but he didn't care too much. After all, skepticism was the judge's way of protecting themselves. If Hanks was so close to him that he couldn't wait to be sworn brothers, Roja would find it strange. "I understand. Thank you for escorting me, Count." After tidying up his appearance and signaling to the guard at the door, the golden and mahogany door finally opened slowly. Luoya strolled into the room, found a guest seat, and sat down. He looked at the exquisite decorations on the wall and waited attentively. Not long after, the door between the thrones opened, and a white-haired old man walked into the room. "Well, child, it's just the two of us here. You don't have to be so polite. Grandpa Hardadef, we haven't seen each other for half a year. How are you?" The old man and the young man, who had not seen each other for a long time, exchanged a few pleasantries. The atmosphere was like that of a child returning from school and a grandpa next door, and Luoya was filled with emotions. Luoya cherished this kind of relationship between a senior and a junior. Looking at the smile on the old man's face, the black-haired young man finally felt a little more at ease. With this thought in mind, Luoya reached out and took out a wooden box, placed the ring with the Heathcliff family crest on the table, and then smiled bitterly. Originally, after you won the Challengers Cup, I wanted to invite you here openly. But something happened halfway, so I had to reduce the attention on you and make you come here secretly. It's my fault that you, the hero who won glory for the theocracy, didn't receive flowers and applause. Outsiders? That's not necessarily true. In fact, it was also Her Royal Highness' order that I won the Challengers Cup. But after returning to the country, I heard that Her Royal Highness hasn't shown up in public for a long time, and I couldn't contact her through letters. Grandpa Hardadef, may I ask what is the Nuwa Ire? Child, I know your concern. This is the reason why I asked you to come to the holy capital. Counting the days, Nuwa Ire hasn't shown up in public for more than a month. It's inevitable that people are worried. Sensing the seriousness in the old man's words, Luoya couldn't help but raise his own speculation. Unexpectedly, the sanctum went silent. A bad premonition? The white-haired old man recalled the girl's situation and sighed. He looked at Luoya with a solemn expression and said, "Nuwa Ire is turning into an angel." Chapter 4:14. Saint Lorraine was as quiet as ever. The night breeze of early winter blew across the heavily guarded palace, and the cold wave was filtered by the warm current. However, in the meeting room next to the throne, the black-haired young man could still feel an inexplicable chill. Slowly digesting John's words, the black-haired young man's face gradually stiffened. "Grandpa John, the so-called angelization is..." The white-haired old man roughly explained to Luoya the principles and difficulties of the bloodline promotion of the Heathcliff family, as well as the contradiction of power in Shia. Angels were the right-hand men of Shia in ancient times. Their power could be said to be worthy of the title of God. Now, countless years later, although Heathcliff had become the manager of the Vatican with the bloodline left behind by Shia, he had never stopped exploring his own power. At that time, Heathcliff thought that the power of angels was a huge treasure that could be exploited infinitely. However, with the accumulation of related spells and secret techniques, the family's development of the bloodline gradually matured, and the huge hidden danger began to gradually reveal itself, which is the irreversible reaction of angelization. Angelization sounded like the ultimate form of the angelic bloodline, and in fact, it was true in terms of bloodline purity. Unfortunately, this so-called angelization did not mean becoming an omniscient and omnipotent god, nor was it becoming an ancient messenger of Shia. It was a runaway power. Divinity? The white-haired old man sighed and told the young man what happened when Luoya was not around. In fact, not long after Nuo Iyer arrived at St. Lorraine for treatment, an accident happened that outsiders did not know about. The bloodline power in the girl's body broke through the limit, causing a short period of angelization and a runaway power. Nuo Iyer has gone to Tuck Fortress. That's right. The angelization of the atavistic bloodline is much more serious than I thought. However, the suppression effect is limited, and it must be vented to a certain extent. Only the mutants can bear such a task. After hearing John's explanation, the young man finally understood why there were no letters from Nuo Iyer for so long. Obviously, the most suitable place to deal with this kind of impulsive killing was the battlefield, especially the battlefield of the mutants. If it was a war between humans, cruel killings would often bring shame. For Nuo Iyer, the future successor of the Vatican, the importance of reputation was self-evident. It would be a big problem if she accidentally killed a surrendered soldier. In fact, there was no one in the world who knew Nuo Iyer's bloodlust better than Luoya. In The Recorder's Eye, one of the scenes that left the deepest impression on Luoya was Nuo Iyer's murderous smile when she stood on top of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. In the past, Luoya meant that Nuo Iyer's personality was the reason. But now that he thought about it, it was actually wrong. But unlike the game, Nuo Iyer's situation in reality was much worse. Not only did her extraordinary power improve faster, but her bloodline upgrade was also brought forward. Under the influence of these two factors, to what extent would her runaway power reach? Actually, Iyer told me not to tell you before she left. But as her elder, I naturally have to consider her safety first. That's why I called you here. Well, this is a request from Heathcliff. I hope you can go to Tuck Fortress. In the room, the white-haired old man's voice was calm but solemn as he made the request. Luoya couldn't help but widen his eyes slightly. Luoya was shocked by the white-haired old man's words for a moment. He reflexively wanted to agree, but when the words came to his mouth, he had doubts in his heart. Well, there is indeed such a possibility. But even so, I still hope that you can go and see her because you are the anchor in her heart. Yes, the way to resist the angelization is to vent one's power and consume one's divinity. On the other hand, it is to strengthen one's humanity. You are special to that child. You are the anchor that holds on to oneself and stabilizes her spirit. Of course, Kai-In is also one of the anchors of Nuo Iyer. That's why I asked her to go to Tuck Fortress. I see. I understand. Luoya thought for a moment and sorted out the situation. He then opened his mouth and agreed to go to Tuck Fortress. The white-haired old man was relieved to see this and told the young man about the following arrangements. Because the matter of Nuo Iyer's bloodline upgrade was still a secret, Luoya's departure naturally couldn't be made public. For this point, Holy See John adopted the old method, which was to let the most trusted inquisitors take on the task of escorting Luoya. Of course, Luoya's own guards could also follow. Grandpa John, did something unpleasant happen between Count Hanks and the Acate family? I always feel that he is a little wary of me. Is that so? I understand. I'm afraid the atmosphere of this trip won't be too good. Nuo Iyer was one of the rare atavistic bloodlines in Heath Crete. From the moment he was born, the growth of his extraordinary power had been carefully deduced in order to prevent any accidents. The bloodline upgrade, which could endanger his life, was of the utmost importance. In fact, when he was young, the Vatican's prediction of Nuo-Ayer's growth had always been accurate until the age of 9, when Nuo-Ayer met Luoya. There was no doubt that this change must have something to do with Luoya. However, whether it was the bloodline of the Akate family that promoted Nuo-Ayer's growth, or whether it was the encounter between Luoya and Nuo-Ayer that changed something, Holy See John wasn't sure. However, there was one thing that the old man knew very well. May Shia bless you. Going to the front line was a major event. Even if he wasn't going to the battlefield, he still needed to report to his family. Most importantly, according to the journey to the eastern region, plus the time spent with Nuo-Ayer, he estimated that he would only be back next year. According to Kadia's letter, although the Eric family couldn't raise their heads in front of the alliance between Akate and Heathcrete, they were still very active behind the scenes. In the end, they were just waiting for an opportunity. Now that Nuo-Ayer's situation was so unstable, no one knew if the Eric family would take the opportunity to do something. It was necessary to be vigilant, but it was a little awkward for Luoya to set off now because not only Nuo-Ayer was about to upgrade his bloodline, but the boy was also in a state of waiting for a breakthrough. The three pagan leaders, including Cynthia, felt that Luoya's behavior was very inappropriate. They all said that it was too risky. After all, the difficulty of upgrading from Source Level 4 to Source Level 3 was no less than the difficulty of upgrading Nuo-Ayer to Golden Bloodline. How could he be unprepared? But if it was Luoya who was here, why would he want to break through on the carriage? Wasn't this the same as raising an antenna? Was he afraid that he wouldn't die fast enough? After some consideration, the worried Rodney, Wood, and Cynthia jointly came forward to advise Luoya. Wood, who was the oldest, said these words carefully. He wanted Luoya to think about it again, but the boy's attitude was very firm this time. In this case, the conditions for Luoya to break through were actually the same. The boy had a vague hunch that this journey might not be as smooth as he imagined. Guards and so on were external factors. The right thing to do was to increase his strength as soon as possible. 200 years after the Gemini War, there were no longer any pagans among the targets of the Inquisition. However, in the Code of the Holy See, pagans were not granted legitimacy. They were in a gray state. In the eyes of most of the inquisitors, pagans were not bad people, but they were definitely not good people. Count, I know that you are wary of me and don't trust my warriors. But I want to remind you that the place we are going to next does not distinguish between Shia believers and pagans. It is only divided between humans and non-humans. In this case, I think we should seek common ground and put aside our differences. Yes, although our beliefs are different, our warriors are not completely without similarities. They desire for a safe journey, to avoid fighting alone, to take turns to preserve their fighting strength, and finally, to arrive at Tark Fortress smoothly. These are the common interests of both of us. For this interest, I think we can temporarily put aside the differences in living habits, beliefs, and customs. I understand. Seek common ground and put aside our differences. That is indeed the case. A week after meeting with the Holy See, a mixed team silently left St. Lorraine in the night. Looking back at the tall city of angels, Luoya's mind flashed with the beautiful figure of the blonde girl. While missing her, he silently made a promise. The next time I return, I will bring her back. I will. Chapter 415. A month later, in the eastern region of St. Maester, a well-trained team was slowly moving forward on a snowy winter road. Inside a wide carriage, a black-haired boy was reading a book, while opposite him, a red-haired man was resting with his eyes closed. The interior of the carriage was spacious, but it wasn't exquisite. It couldn't be compared to the carriage Luoya used when he was in Akat's house, let alone the Sorofia family's jewel necklace team. But this kind of carriage often had several people on it, making it vibrate as if many people were exercising. The reason was very simple, because this wide carriage with tables, chairs, and bookcases was the command center of Luoya's team. Overall, this journey wasn't peaceful. First of all, Ka Dia had once explained to Luoya about the situation. They couldn't find the road. Why didn't they build a more durable and more efficient brick road? This matter was actually very easy to understand. To put it bluntly, the amount of work was too large, and they didn't have the money and time. The most important thing was that there were no merchants passing by, so there was no profit. Moreover, if the road was repaired, it would be easier for humans to travel, and it would be easier for the mutants to travel. Originally, if they broke through the barrier, they could still trade distance for time, but if the road was repaired, then the devils would directly enter the village. Whether it was summer rain or winter snow, the traces of the road would be temporarily erased, and even in autumn, the foot-deep fallen leaves would make it difficult to distinguish the road. 1 second to remember. Trace detector, price, 50,000 points. Regarding Luo Ya's foresight, Hanks and the others from the Inquisition felt ashamed, but no one thought that this was just the beginning. The monsters in the eastern region weren't afraid of humans, and they were fierce. Once they set their eyes on their prey, they would follow them for a long time. For more than a week, Luo Ya and the others almost didn't have a good night's sleep. There were 6-legged bloodthirsty deer, 2-faced hyenas, and all kinds of strange monsters rushed out at night and fought with the human team in the dark. The Perseverance Church had been traveling outside for many years as mercenaries, while the Power Church had been forced to become barbarians in the mountains. Both sides had rich experience in field battles and were very good at dealing with demons. The judges' team had rich experience in fighting against humans. It was after the Heresy Army and the Inquisitors had worked together to survive another night of being attacked by magical creatures. In the morning, the team was moving forward in laughter and relaxation. They sent out a small team to explore the canyon ahead, only to be suddenly ambushed. Just like that, the mutants suddenly appeared in front of Luo Ya's team. Their average strength was around Origin rank 5. Their bodies were white and green, and their faces were similar to humans but slightly different. They had protruding teeth, sparse hair, and a ferocious appearance. After seeing the corpses of the mutants, even the solemn and silent Hanks changed his expression, showing a natural fear towards humanoid creatures. However, Luo Ya was rather calm, because he had seen similar scenes before. Why are you panicking? They'll die if they're killed, what's there to be afraid of? In terms of body structure, they were basically the same as ordinary humans. They knew how to ambush and use weapons, which meant that they had intelligence. However, they didn't retreat after attacking for a long time, which meant that their intelligence wasn't high. During the battle, Luo Ya heard strange cries, which should be the language of the mutants. From this, it could be seen that they had the ability to communicate. The sudden attack of the mutants was unexpected, but it also rang the alarm bell for Luo Ya and the others, making the following situation complicated and confusing in everyone's eyes. It also made everyone understand that this wasn't the gentle home of humans at the back, but the front line full of foreign enemies. The whole team was further united because of this. Chapter 416. In the command room of Tucker Fortress, a blond middle-aged man looked at the planes outside the window without saying a word. Behind him, men and women in the holy white robes of the Vatican stood in a row. It was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Only the whistling of the night wind conveyed the fact that time was still passing. Where is Nuair now? As the person in charge of a department in the Holy See, Catherine had never been so cautious before. Wherever she went, she was always authoritative and stern. However, this shrewd and capable woman actually smiled apologetically. Unfortunately, her words didn't manage to ease the man's emotions. She was also very clear about the reason why. When this decision was announced, the bishops of the right department heaved a sigh of relief. After all, for them who had not experienced clinical treatment for a long time, the little princess's angelization came too quickly. It was completely beyond their original expectations. But as long as they went to Tucker Fortress, they believed that everything would be fine. But unfortunately, the plan was perfect, but the change was even more unexpected. Today, she has been out for nearly 10 hours. This is far beyond the time limit of my past. Bishop Catherine, Can you explain why my daughter's condition is still not improving? Lord Cain, Her Highness has the bloodline of the atavistic bloodline, so the situation is different from yours. In fact, the number of enemies killed by Her Highness is twice as many as yours. The blond man's face turned ugly as he slammed his hand on the table. The sound was heard, and the bishops were silent. Even Catherine's body trembled. Angelization was a battle between humanity and divinity. It was also the riskiest promotion in the Heathcrete family. If they were defeated in this battle, the degree of deification would exceed the limit, and the final result would be that they would not be able to return. The terrifying consequences sent chills down their spines. But after thinking for a moment, Catherine still stood up and insisted. Then what are you going to do? Are you going to let her soak in that damn ice lake for a year? What's going on? Did I say something wrong? Lord Cain, in fact, the ice lake's effect on Her Highness is very limited. It can only stop the erosion of divinity. It has no healing effect. His Highness' condition did improve today, but it wasn't because of the ice lake. It was because of the letter. After muttering to himself, the blond man couldn't help but widen his eyes. Then, he suddenly remembered one of the letters sent from the Holy Capital. Today's improvement is because of the letter? My lord, with Her Highness' current situation, we feel that her own will would be more effective than a massacre. For example, your company and letters from the people she cares about. After hearing the expert's suggestion, Prince Cain raised his head and looked ahead. He recalled Luo Ye's message and said resolutely, "That's right." After a month of traveling through forests and mountains, Luo Ye's team finally entered the plains. Their line of sight, which had been blocked for a long time, was liberated. It also let everyone see the uncanny workmanship of nature and the ability of human beings to change nature. Tucker Fortress, the destination of Luo Ye's team, finally appeared in front of everyone's eyes after a month of arduous trekking. It also made everyone who was about to reach their destination excited. In ancient times, Wang Yimei quenched her thirst, and today, Wang Yimei ran away. After a few days of continuous marching, Luo Ye's team received a second surprise. That was, someone came to welcome them. Or rather, someone came to welcome him. The knight regiment that came from afar stood by the roadside. The commander of the regiment stepped forward and respectfully handed over a letter. John of the Holy See clearly supported the relationship between Luo Ye and Nuire. However, as a father, Cain was slightly more stubborn. Although he was good to Luo Ye, it was absolutely not to the extent of sending someone to welcome him. Strictly speaking, this letter was a request for help from Cain. The content was also very simple. It was to ask Luo Ye to hurry to the fortress as soon as possible to maintain Nuire's consciousness. After reading the entire letter, the youth's heart became anxious. Because when Luo Ye read the letter, Nuire had already entered the peak period. Thinking of this, the youth didn't delay any time. After entrusting the command of the pagan army to Hanks, he immediately set off and followed the knight regiment towards Tucker Fortress. The worried youth hastened his horse. However, in the distant Tucker Fortress, boundless fog gradually rose without anyone noticing. It started to drown everything like a tide. Chapter 417. My lord, today, it's almost time to rest. Riding at full speed, the armored commander pondered for a long time before he came up to Luo Ye and suggested. The black-haired boy was silent for a moment, then he looked back at the tired soldiers behind him, and then looked at the sky that was already dark, and his face showed a hesitant look. But this kind of rapid march also had a price. For example, although the people were fine, but the horse under Luo Ye was already somewhat unable to hold on, not to mention now the sun had already set. Marching at night was already dangerous, and in the east where the mutants were active, it was a big taboo. How long until we arrive? Can't get in? So it's like this. Since they couldn't get in, then they might as well rest for a night to adjust their state. After all, they were afraid that they would be busy later. At this time, Nuire needed Luo Ye's help, which was equivalent to saying that the boy was one of her spiritual pillars. To be able to be respected by thousands of people in the future, as a man, it would be a lie to say that he wasn't happy, But Luo Ye couldn't just be happy, because recently he thought of something. In his previous life, the boy was attracted by Luo Ye's character, so he played the game's common line, and didn't play the female protagonist's individual branches. But Luo Ye vaguely remembered that when he browsed the forum, some spoiler posts did say that the female protagonists would encounter danger in the individual branches. For this question, Luo Ye thought for a long time, and he had some answers in his heart. The external threat of the Eric family was indeed affected by Luo Ye's action and stopped the rebellion. This influence was good, but Nua Ayer's bloodline promotion in reality was advanced after she came in contact with Luo Ye. This was a bad thing, and the crisis caused by this would be worse than the original work. Because of his thoughts, Luo Ye was silent all the way, and the night regiment slowed down in the afterglow of the setting sun. The accompanying knights were relieved that they could have a place to rest today. After 2 hours, the team arrived at a town attached to Tuk Fortress. As the largest resource distribution center and resting place behind Tark Fortress, Bank Town had plenty of food and other resources. As a result, it was often attacked by the mutants who crossed over the mountains. There was a sizable garrison in the town for protection, and there was even a market for military merchants. In this desolate land far away from the theocracy, Luo Ye, the champion of the Challengers Cup and the #1 of the younger generation, had not yet spread here, but the surname of Akot played a big role. Although Banktown was close to Tuk Fortress, strictly speaking, it was the territory of Ka Dia, the chief logistics commander. When Mayor Carmen found that the only son of his superior's superior suddenly appeared at the gate, he was very excited. He prepared a sumptuous dinner for Luo Ye and the others. The black-haired youth did not expect that he could get preferential treatment because of Ka Dia's name, but he accepted Carmen's kindness. Thinking of this, Luo Ye told Mayor Carmen about Ka Dia's situation, and the logistics officer also made a suggestion after learning about Luo Ye's itinerary. Fog. The man holding the wine glass sighed at the impermanence of the weather. Luo Ye smiled and did not care. After dinner, the group returned to the hotel, and Luo Ye slept on a proper bed again after more than a month. At midnight, when the moonlight was covered by dark clouds, a violent tremor suddenly spread out from the depths of the youth's soul, making the sleeping Luo Ye suddenly open his eyes and instantly wake up, and then suddenly change color. The crown stone was trembling. Chapter 418. Before going to sleep tonight, Luo Ye thought that he could have a good night's rest, but things didn't go as he wished. In his sleep, Luo Ye had a vague feeling. It was as if something in the deepest part of his body was resisting something from the outside world. It constantly overflowed with curse power, covering the surroundings as if it was protecting itself. Then, a beautiful, familiar, and frightening figure flashed in his mind. Frost, a room full of frost. This was what Luo Ye saw after waking up. The loss of control of power was terrifying, but at this time, Luo Ye didn't care about this because he could feel that the crown stone wasn't harming him. Instead, it was protecting him. When he understood this, the young man's face completely changed. How is this possible? In the center of the street, Luo Ye, whose body was surrounded by cold air, also saw the strange phenomenon. It was a white fog that connected the sky and the earth in the distance. It was as if the world was divided into 2 halves. It was spreading and rolling, and it was quickly approaching here. That fog is coming. The border guards keenly sensed the curse power in the fog and sounded the alarm. The curse signal flare rose into the sky and emitted a bright light and loud sound. In the colorful light, people looked up at the sky, faintly saw a blurry giant face flashing in the fog and hiding in the depths. This strange scene caused the guards to scream and caused further chaos. Under the alarm, the entire town began to wake up rapidly. More and more soldiers rushed out of their houses amidst the ear-piercing noises. Members of the Night Order began to gather with weapons in their hands. Mayor Carmen, who was fully armed, led the soldiers to the top of the city wall. The 6 disasters was a disaster that had wiped out many ancient civilizations. The number of people and the quality of their equipment had no effect on them. Even a level 1 source level master who was comparable to a god could not escape from their hands. It was because of this that they were terrifying. As monsters who were enemies of humans, the mutants naturally wouldn't understand the special situation today. There was only one possibility for them not to come. On the other hand, the nearby creatures also reacted. The ground was gradually being devoured, and the sky was no longer visible. Looking at the strange silver mist that was slowly advancing towards the town, everyone was filled with fear of the unknown. While breathing heavily, Carmen gave the order to attack. However, no matter if it was arrows or spells, none of them had any effect on the mist. That person is... Step back. At this moment, the youth's figure was reflected in everyone's eyes. The archers put down their arrows, and the cursemoncers also stopped their curses. Standing on the city wall full of soldiers, no one dared to make a noise, because everyone felt that when Luoya appeared, something changed. Everyone who was watching the young man held their breaths and observed the changes in front of them. They did not dare to speak, and in this silence, two colors of ice blue and dim yellow appeared on the young man's body. The sound of water vapor freezing and the sound of sand colliding was heard out of nowhere. He stepped forward, and his golden eyes burned like candlelight. He raised his head in front of the army and stared at the void. Time passed bit by bit. Luoya's curse was like a lamp burning brighter and brighter. The hazy figure of a beast formed by the frozen air began to faintly appear. An illusory figure also flashed behind the youth along with the angry roar of the wind. Under the influence of the power of the frozen earth, his expression was as calm and indifferent as if frozen in time. However, the light in his eyes told the monsters in the distance that he would never retreat. Retreat, retreat? She above. Long live Lord Luoya. At the highest point, the black-haired youth who was listening to the cheers of thousands of people slowly retracted his breath. The frozen earth maker and the wind summoner disappeared, and the two colors of light gradually extinguished. However, in the golden eyes, endless worry filled Luoya's eyes. Collector, this was the only person who could not show his true face in front of him in the headquarters of the Appraisal Association. He was also the nominal leader of a large-scale organization hidden in the country under the control of the church. Just like now. Beside the candlelight at the end of the table, the thief collector's voice entered the ears of the man with a cold face. It seemed to come from afar, and at the same time, it was telling a terrifying truth. This is different from what you said a few years ago. In the darkness, the man's magnetic voice echoed in the space. It sounded like he was explaining and sighing at the same time. Then, why do I believe that I can succeed this time? Facing the cold face of the man at the end of the table, the thief collector raised his hands as if he was presenting the world in front of the man. In this era, the rhythm of fate has been disrupted. Although the existence of the Akat family is special, they are far from invincible. Furthermore, this is your last chance. After all, the remnants of the three races alliance have been stimulated by him, and they are about to break out of their cocoons and become butterflies. The words of the man in the darkness made Brian's expressionless face even more gloomy and cold. However, he had to admit that he had hit his weak spot. With the current situation in St. Mestre, if Princess Nua broke through again, the nobles who were watching from the sidelines would completely lean towards the alliance between Heathcrete and Akat. Brian's long-term plan would also be ruined. The man softly called out Brian's past name and spoke of his future prediction and advice. However, these words made the cold face of the man squint his eyes. Brian looked at the end of the table and asked calmly. The man's question was abrupt and went straight to the point. The collector paused for a moment, but soon after he laughed. Perhaps that is the case, but isn't your understanding of that race too deep? You don't trust me? It's simple. It's because I have some connections with them. Yes, it was a long time ago. I see, so that's how it is. Then, I have no more questions. This is your last chance, and I accept it. The cold man turned around and left. Looking at Brian's departing figure, the collector didn't say anything else. It was only after the man's figure had completely disappeared that he muttered to himself again. In the silent room, the man looked at the untouched teacup in front of him and sighed. Then, he turned around and looked at the relief sculpture that he had obtained not long ago. Then this time, what are you going to do? From the tranquility of daily life to the sudden shock of facing the unknown, and finally surviving the crisis, the twists and turns of life made many people exhausted, but it also made many people see the current situation clearly. After the fog receded, Carmen and the other high-ranking officers on the city wall gathered together. In the middle of the crowd, the black-haired young man closed his eyes and calmed his breath. This was not a historical fragment, but the real world. In the face of the real ancient disaster, Luo Ye's ability could protect himself, but he couldn't protect everyone. A single 6 disasters aura could not make the enemy retreat. Only by summoning the Wind Summoner together with the aura of the frozen earth could it truly deter it. The young man had the crown source substance and the crown stone, but in the fortress, there was no awakened from the Akot family who could shelter him from the wind and rain. So, what would happen to them when they were attacked by the 6 disasters? Could they withstand it? In the end, why would that thing be here? Was it the Saint Heroes Society? No, they should only be able to control the egg. The almost complete 6 disasters was not something that humans could control. In other words, Mother Goddess? Knights, follow me to support Tucker Fortress. The rest of you stay behind and immediately report the situation to the Holy Capital. After the fog receded, the road was silent. Only the cold night wind whistled. The cavalry was extremely silent along the way, and the soldiers looked dignified. Luo Ye didn't give any more orders. Everyone was fully alert, paying attention to everything in the sky and on the ground. Why is there light? Wait, light? The young man's brain seemed to be frozen, and the reason was very simple. The sun rose in the east, but Tucker Fortress was also in the east. Chapter 419. The Light of Dawn. This was something Luo Ye shouldn't see. For the knights who rushed to the foot of the fortress after a night of attack, the fortress in front of them should be dark. The light of dawn may plate it with a layer of gold, but it would never enter people's sight. Under the light of dawn, Luo Ye and the knights saw an unforgettable scene. Tucker Fortress, this impregnable fortress that stood on the eastern border for hundreds of years, disappeared just like that. In front of Luo Ye and others, there was nothing. The giant object that connected the mountains on the left and right disappeared into thin air. The only thing left was the mountain pass that led to the endless Tucker Plain. Hidden Fog. This was the name of the monster that confronted him for a long time last night. It was also one of the 6 major disasters passed down from ancient times. There was almost no record of Hidden Fog. It was only known that it was silently activated and would completely erase everything, because everything had been swallowed up by it without a sound. 1 second memory. Once the large-scale defense curse was activated, it would affect the magic of the entire area. It was impossible for Luo Ye not to notice it. There were no traces of arrows or attack curses nearby. In other words, it was peaceful here last night. A creepy feeling climbed up the young man's back, and it also made him roughly guess the ability of this horrible monster, silently devouring space. Fortress. Where is the fortress? The voices of the knights behind him continued to come. Some people were talking to themselves blankly, some people felt that they were in a dream, and some people's spirits began to gradually collapse in front of the incomprehensible reality. This time, Hidden Fog devoured not only the impregnable fortress that was built hundreds of years ago to its current scale, but also hundreds of thousands of elites of the theocracy stationed in it. In addition, countless materials, even the first successor of the theocracy, Prince Kai-in, was in this fortress. Politics, economy, and military were the most important elements of a country. Almost all of them had suffered irreparable damage in this disaster. To the entire human world, the loss of Tucker Fortress had opened a door for the mutants to attack. The natural moat had become a passageway for them to pass through. Thinking of the consequences of this unprecedented upheaval, Luo Ye felt as if his brain was burning, and the only thing that supported him to maintain his emotions was only one thing, and that was the hope from Nuo. Prince Kai Yin's letter once mentioned that Nuo had improved after reading his letter. That letter was written by Luo Ye more than 2 months ago to report the victory of the Challenger Cup. After that letter, Luo Ye didn't write anything else, and that was the reason why he was so anxious to come here. The black-haired young man trembled and touched his waist. He reached out to touch the feather-like pattern on his waist. Luo Ye's mood finally calmed down a little. It's still here, still here. Thinking of this, the young man put his hand on his forehead and pondered for a moment. Then, his body burned with a red light, and a huge skeleton suddenly rose from the ground in the explosion of the curse power. The suffocating pressure shocked everyone present. Looking back at the knights behind him who were once disciplined but were now on the verge of collapse, the black-haired young man asked in a stern voice. His golden pupils flashed, and his gaze was majestic and sharp. It made the knights who looked at him tremble as they felt some kind of indescribable pressure. Chapter 420. Close, very close. After a day of galloping, Luo Ye's condition wasn't as good as he imagined. In other words, he underestimated the consumption of his energy during the confrontation with the hidden fog. After observing the battle between the 3 groups of aliens and the Nuire, Luo Ye was sure that the girl's ability was gradually improving. The scale of the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood was the most direct manifestation of this. Resonance. This was a situation that would only occur when the sacred artifact sensed the breath of its owner. In the case where Luo Ye didn't move, the only possibility for it to react was the appearance of the other half of the authority. The black-haired boy who immediately understood the situation opened his eyes slightly and began to quickly perceive the situation around him. Unfortunately, what appeared in front of him wasn't the girl he was familiar with, but a light that came from afar. 1 second, remember the blazing ray with light and heat cut through the darkness. It was like a spear of stars that extended infinitely toward the boy. The hot wind that could burn everything rushed toward him, but Luo Ye couldn't react in time. The reason was very simple. It was a sudden and extreme attack that took less than 1/10 of a second. Not to mention normal humans, even extraordinaires with superior physical and mental abilities would not be able to cast spells in such a short period of time. Attacking without even saying hello, how rude. Under the strange fluctuation of the spell, the air in front of the boy suddenly became hazy and dreamy. The bright and scorching light hit Luo Ye's body like refraction and fell into the darkness behind him, making a loud noise. The black-haired boy looked up at the distant sky. What he saw was the light that rose like the sun and the girl with the wings of light spread out. Thousands of meters away, Luo Ye's golden pupils and the girl floating in the air looked at each other. Both of them didn't say anything. The black-haired boy felt a chill in his heart at this moment. He knew that the most terrifying thing had finally happened. Looking at Luo Ye on the ground, the golden-haired angel's face didn't change at all. The once blue eyes had been eroded by the divine light, and the aura on her body was far from what it was in the past. In Luo Ye's eyes, the girl now seemed like another person with the same face, or perhaps another god. Has she completely turned into an angel? Turning into an angel was indeed irreversible, but Kai-in said that there was a red line to turning into an angel. As long as one didn't cross it, there was still hope. So, did Nuire cross this line? Nuire. It's me, Luo Ye Kat. Do you still recognize me? Facing the sky and earth, Luo Ye looked up at the sky and asked with a hoarse voice. His eyes were focused on the figure in the sky. Then he saw a scene that could be considered as his salvation. The silent white flames began to burn on the girl's body. At the same time, an indescribable pressure suddenly fell on Luo Ye. Under the huge pressure of the god's aura, the ancient gods from the distant shore appeared one after another. However, this terrifying pressure didn't bring fear to Luo Ye, but surprise. Seeing the changes in the girl's body, Luo Ye's golden pupils suddenly shrank. Thousands of emotions surged in his heart, and for a moment he even choked up. The agitated curse power roared in the boy's body and rushed up to light up his eyes. The figures of Gulandair, Paitila, and Altacia turned into solid bodies one after another, confronting the expanding light in the sky. The ancient gods that appeared at the same time didn't look down on the world as they did in the past. Under the vast and mighty light that had occupied the sky, the giant golden snake narrowed its eyes. The white-haired which was also expressionless, which was rare. The huge skeleton was silent, condensing its energy and power to the extreme. In the silence, the three gods all looked as if they were facing a great enemy. Nu'air was the most powerful main character in Recorder's Eye. There was no doubt about this. She was the light of judgment, the holy sword of condemnation, the child of destiny that was born after many years in this world. Now that she had almost turned into a god, she was even more dangerous. Lord Hero, I know that you want to save her, but I advise you to give up on this idea. That isn't an ordinary angel. Give it your all, or you'll die. Angels, as a race under the primordial goddess in ancient times, had always considered themselves as the messengers of God. Indeed, most races in the outside world viewed them as sacred. But in fact, as a race, just like how humans had different talents, angels also had different levels and divisions of labor. Therefore, generations of Heathcreed's heirs had great potential. The awakening of their bloodline was a journey for them to find their roots, or rather, to find the ancient angel who was the most similar to them and obtain and inherit their power. This was why every member of the Heathcreed family was different after awakening their bloodline. Angel King. The current Nu'air was, to a certain extent, a fallen god. She was also the king of a race like Paitila and the others. This was also the reason why the three ancient gods were facing a great enemy. In terms of attributes, the power of an angel was not easy to deal with. Except for Gulandair's immortality, Paitila and Altatia's powers were unable to suppress her. Boom! Give up the sky and fight in close combat? In mid-air, the holy beast clashed with the angel. Earth, fire, and boulders blocked the girl's path of escape. In front of her was Mother Earth's giant mouth that was glowing red. But in the face of this situation, the blonde girl's expression did not change. She did not slow down or dodge. Instead, she chose to fall into the snake's mouth. The moment Nu'air swallowed, Paitila's pupils contracted. The witch below also frowned. Both gods did not understand why the enemy would voluntarily enter Mother Earth's body. Inside the giant snake, a golden light suddenly appeared. It began to flicker from one point, and then countless cracks quickly spread out. Part of the giant snake's body that covered the sky turned golden as if it was corroded by poison. Then, with a loud bang, it collapsed. Not good. It could not be stopped. In the sky, the giant snake that was split into two parts let out a miserable cry and fell to the ground. The angel that broke out of the snake's body further accelerated. She spread her wings of light, and while moving forward, she released thousands of arrows of light from it. The giant's roar sounded in the night. At the critical moment, the Gulandair burst out with a strong aura of death. It swung its fist at the meteor that was rushing straight at it. Under the power of the King of Giants' fist, the blonde angel finally changed her expression and changed her route temporarily to dodge. The sky that had already turned golden changed color when the Nu'air attacked. It rolled like breathing, constantly collecting magic elements and transforming them into the girl's power. At the end of the attack, the Gulandair resisted with its whistling bone fist. Although it was only a little each time, the Gulandair that came in contact with the angel's power was also corroded. The time that it could fight was constantly decreasing like a countdown. And after a series of changes, Luo Ya's curse power was almost exhausted. Under the illumination of bursts of light, the Queen of Witches floating beside Luo Ya turned her head and looked at the boy. For the first time, there was some sincere pleading in her words. Looking at the black-haired boy, the witch said that the future could not be changed. The Nu'air's angelization came from the King of Angels. This was something that no one had thought of before. It was an accident, and it was also her own destiny. The witch's words were rarely in line with the common values of the secular world. The logic that she said was almost irrefutable. However, after listening to Altatia's words, Luo Ya looked forward without saying a word. The moment such a question arose in the boy's heart, time seemed to stop flowing. A piercing sense of crisis was like a knife on his back. But when he thought of the girl's cold corpse after she died, Luo Ya's heart felt as if it was being torn apart. If he killed the Nua Iyer, Luo Ya could indeed live, but there was no difference between that and death. The Nua Iyer's angelization was his own reason, but the boy also had a reason to save her. Under the illumination of the light, the black-haired boy's tone was calm. He looked at the witch in front of him. The golden flames in his eyes were like candlelight, shining directly into people's hearts, but there was no room for doubt. Under the black-haired boy's powerful words, the source substance of the crown exploded with light and thunder. Amidst the rising curse power, the boy slowly stepped forward and calmly said the words of the promise. "She's only asleep and I will wake her up. Right now, right here." Chapter 421. Under the night sky, the white-haired witch looked at the young man who was burning the last of his curse power and sighed expressionlessly. She knew that Luo Ya had made his choice. Is it the same choice again? Sir Hero is really desperate for a girl. But how are you going to wake her up? Facing the witch's question, the black-haired young man remained silent for a moment. Then he calmly explained his plan. Following the young man's words, Altatia's scarlet eyes gradually widened. She stared at the calm young man for a long time and finally nodded slowly. Meanwhile, Luo Ya's curse power reached its peak and began its final eruption. Frozen earth. Under the encirclement of ice, Luo Ya slowly raised his hands. A huge amount of frost covered the sky and collided with the golden sky controlled by the Nua Iyer. Two completely different forms of power began a battle. The golden and white armies clashed, creating chaos in the sky. Meanwhile, on the ground, the frost had also surrounded the blonde girl. Under Luo Ya's eruption, the blonde girl was surrounded by the frost and her connection with the sky was cut off. However, this didn't make her panic. Instead, her attacks became fiercer and fiercer. After the continuous confrontation, the Gulen Dayer had reached its limit. In order to awaken the Nua Iyer, the first thing that Luo Ya had to do was to get close to the girl. Whether it was physical contact or a spell, distance was the prerequisite. And the only one who could help Luo Ya get close to the girl was the Gulen Dayer. Just move forward. Under the surging of his curse power, the young man with a red glow around his body walked straight toward the girl. Seeing Luo Ya approaching, the Angel King immediately raised her vigilance. The expanding curse power was compressed and released in her hands, transforming into a light of destruction that could destroy everything. The silent trust in the young man's heart completely ignited the battle intent of the ancient god. The huge skeleton roared at the sky. The red glow quickly gathered on one side of its body. The left side of its body was eroded by the golden glow, but the right fist of the Gulen Dayer was as red as the sun. 100 meters. The golden-haired girl switched from offense to defense. She sensed Luo Ya's approach, but the cold air behind her made it impossible for her to retreat. As the aftermath of the Gulen Dayer's attack gradually disappeared, the Angel King chose to defend herself again. The golden-haired girl stretched out the wings of light behind her, and the curse power continued to gather. However, before she could attack, the white-haired witch beside Luo Ya released a curse. As she muttered, Altatia pointed her finger forward. The next moment, a black butterfly appeared out of thin air with the witch's curse as bait. It quickly gathered towards the Nua Iyer, which had the most curse energy, and began to devour her curse energy. 30 meters. As Nua Iyer rushed forward, the cold air that had been gathering around her for a long time suddenly erupted, covering her entire body. The frozen air from the ancient calamity made her movements stiff. A layer of white frost covered her body, but it could not freeze her in a short time. However, Luo Ya's target was not the girl herself. Under the impact of the frozen earth, the wings of light behind Nua Iyer quickly turned into solid ice. The angel's wings shattered and disappeared. The girl was confined to the ground like a bird with broken wings. The moment she sensed this, the cold Angel King showed emotion for the first time. Her face instantly revealed a look of panic. She had lost most of her curse power, her wings were taken away, and her body was covered in frost. However, all of this further aroused the Angel King's murderous intent, because she knew that the person in front of her was just a human. Chapter 422. In the center of the plains at night, the black-haired boy and the blonde-haired girl stood opposite each other. Their lips touched and the curse powers cycled back and forth, and the girl's consciousness gradually woke up. Luo ya I. Feeling the Nua Ayer's violent shaking, the black-haired boy immediately reached out and covered the girl's eyes. The curse power was exhausted, his body was seriously injured, and the side effects of the crown stone were like a shadow, but Luo Ya knew that he must not fall down now. I'm sorry, sob, I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize, Your Highness is really a troublesome princess. As if she was afraid that the boy would leave, the blonde-haired angel's response was unprecedentedly intense. The scorching kiss was mixed with the salty taste of tears, as if the love that had been brewing for many years was constantly intertwined. Until the golden light in the sky completely dissipated, the girl's tears stopped, and a red flush appeared on her face. The two slowly separated. After looking at Luo Ya and getting confirmation, the teary-eyed girl suddenly pulled out her hand that was embedded in the boy's chest. Even if she had killed thousands of mutants and personally created several mountains of corpses and seas of blood, the moment she saw the boy's blood spurting out, the Nua Ayer still had a severe dizziness. It's okay, if it's just this kind of injury, it's okay. Just a little, sleep for a while. Worried that the boy would not wake up, the Nua Ayer called Luo Ya's name, but it was a pity that it was useless. The moment the high-strung mind relaxed, an unprecedented fatigue emerged from the body. After the boy's consciousness was completely relieved, it was as if a string was cut off, and he completely fell into darkness. At the old site of Tucker Fortress, at this time, there were hundreds and thousands of torches and lamps lit in the night, and under the illumination of the lights, there were soldiers who were building fortifications overnight. Now, the emergency construction was being carried out by the reinforcements from Bank Town. After protecting everyone that night, Luo Ya had become the de facto leader of Bank Town. The orders he left behind were immediately supported by Mayor Carmen, especially the matter of building a defensive line at the mountain pass. The black-haired youth had set up an enemy for everyone, thus strengthening his position and spirit. However, what Luo Ya did not expect was that his unintentional words at that time had become true as time passed. Unlike the sinners of the Appraisal Association, Brian had been stationed at Tark Fortress many times in his long life. So, he knew a lot about this human fortress. Therefore, even though the collector had informed him in advance, Brian was still doubtful about the situation in the fortress. That was until he arrived at the plains. After all, according to his estimation, the soldiers who had lost their command system should be dominated by fear and chaos. The mountain pass should also be treated as a forbidden area and be deserted. However, the situation now was the opposite. The soldiers continued to rush over, and they all carried a tragic atmosphere as if they were ready to fight to the death. On the other hand, Brian had plenty of time. When he saw the originally lifelike angel closing her eyes again, the blond man's eyes flickered slightly, but then he no longer cared. Instead, he stared at the moving needle and carefully counted the time. This was the countdown to the peak of the awakening of Her Royal Highness's angelic bloodline. It was also the best time for Brian to kill her. As long as he made a move during this period, whether it was completely pushing her towards angelization or directly killing her, it would be his victory. Thinking back to Collector's words, Brian's gaze sharpened. Akat's awakening might change his fate, but just like what the man said, he was far from being helpless. The power to decide the final outcome was still in Brian's hands. Let's go. Since becoming an extraordinary, the youth's physical state had already broken away from the category of ordinary humans. With the deepening of the degree of mutation, high-grade extraordinary could recover their physical state in a very short time. Even Luo Ya, who was one step away from him, was not much different. But today, the youth experienced something that he had not experienced for a long time. In the past, although Luo Ya was often troubled by side effects, he was rarely injured. The youth, who was known for his explosive and destructive power, could always destroy his opponents. He didn't need to consider whether the damage was excessive. Like this time, the situation where he was seriously injured and the other party was safe was very rare. However, the youth didn't regret it. The moment he saw the Nua Iyer in front of him, the youth who had just woken up was slightly stunned. There was a moment of confusion in his eyes, and he couldn't help but have a straightforward feeling in his heart. With the unique holy and otherworldly face of the angel bloodline, shell-like ears, blue eyes that seemed to be able to see through people's hearts, long and stretched eyelashes, a small and exquisite nose, and cherry-red lips that he had tasted not long ago. Luoya, whose heartbeat quickened a little, gently turned his eyes and blurted out some words to cover up his uneasiness. Feeling the chill and frost in his body, the black-haired youth couldn't help but remind her. However, hearing Luoya's words, the blonde girl didn't care. Seeing the youth wake up, the blonde angel smiled faintly, took the youth's hand and put it on her chest. "That's really a terrible disease." The blonde girl whispered softly with a sobbing tone. The hand holding Luoya trembled slightly. The black-haired youth heard her and smiled bitterly. He looked at the Nua Iyer's red eyes and recalled the girl's previous appearance. "If possible, I hope you never see it again. And in the end, you didn't follow the rules first, waking me up in that way." The black-haired youth recalled his first kiss and raised his eyebrows. The Nua Iyer slightly widened her eyes in a daze, as if she was recalling the distant past. The murmuring girl's eyes gradually blurred. She lowered her head and looked at the figure in her arms and said, amidst the tender words, the blonde girl gently lowered her body. Looking at the tears in the Nua Iyer's eyes, Luoya's heart could no longer suppress the feelings in his heart. The embracing figure's lips once again overlapped, and the surrounding air seemed to be filled with the scorching hot feelings. At this time, the two were no longer in the dark plains, but on a bed in a room. The night wasn't over yet, and it was pitch black outside the window. Seeing this situation, Luoya slightly sighed in relief, knowing that he wasn't unconscious for too long. An outpost built during the War of the Mutants. Luoya listened to the girl's words and nodded. In his heart, he roughly knew the location of the two. As his mind gradually cleared up, Luoya's face gradually became serious. Nua Iyer's angelization wasn't a problem that could be solved once. Luoya just prevented the worst outcome last night and gave the girl another chance. According to Kai Yin's letter, the peak of Nua Iyer's bloodline was still ongoing. As time passed, the girl's situation would probably worsen, and during this period, the most important thing was to accompany and maintain her emotional stability. Now that her father's life was unknown, Nua Iyer's heart had a flaw. Even with Luoya as an anchor to stabilize her, she might not be able to withstand the heavy wind and waves. This was like a leaky boat. Even if it wasn't capsized by the wind and waves, it would slowly sink. Nua Iyer, about Tucker Fortress, I have something to tell you. When the word Tucker Fortress was said by Luoya, the angel's body stiffened. Aware of Nua Iyer's situation, Luoya's heart ached. What you mean is 6 disasters? They were indeed terrifying monsters that violated common sense, but Luoya, who had been in contact with them for a long time, had a deep understanding of them. He understood their boundaries. After thinking for a long time, Luoya felt that the biggest possibility was to devour space, but this involved a problem. That was, although devouring space could erase everything, the person who was devoured might not die immediately. The past can't be changed, but no matter what the result is, everything is not over. So, for that glimmer of hope, defeat them. I will accompany you. Chapter 423. At dawn in the Tucker Plains, the morning sun rose from the horizon, emitting a faint light. The black-haired young man looked at this ray of light and felt the same chill as yesterday. Perhaps, it was even more serious. However, unlike yesterday, Luoya no longer felt uneasy because of this ray of light. After explaining to Noel the nature of the 6 disasters, and the possibility that Cain and the others still had a chance to survive, the fear in the girl's heart towards the upheaval of the Tucker Fortress was finally converted. Exploring that possibility had become the motivation for her to upgrade her bloodline. Although the hole in her heart was barely filled, It could be said that it was temporarily filled. Strong, firm, elegant, and steady. These could be said to be the most obvious labels on the Pope's princess. All along, Thnair had almost never shown weakness in front of Luoya. Although the incident in Tucker Fortress this time was regrettable, it also allowed Luoya to see another side of Nuair that no one knew about. It also allowed him to understand the importance of this girl to him. Thinking so, the black-haired young man gently covered his chest, endured the throbbing pain, and tried to make his expression relaxed. On the other side, the eyes of the golden-haired girl flashed a faint light without warning. At the same time, her body slightly paused, and the reaction of the curse power became a lot more restless. The sudden change made the two people in the room fall into silence for a moment. Noticing the abnormal movement of her bloodline, the girl's face changed, and Luo Ya's face also became serious. It was obvious that such an intense battle had just ended not long ago. This kind of recovery power, well, sorry, I may have to leave for a while. Be careful when you fight if you can't suppress it. Hearing Luo Ya's assumption, the golden-haired girl couldn't help but interrupt. Looking at Nuair's determined eyes, the young man nodded slightly to express his trust. When you come back, bring some food. Yes, anything is fine. After getting injured, I also need to replenish myself. Your Highness won't let your subjects starve, right? Then it's settled. After nodding at each other, the young lady pushed open the door and flew into the distance with her wings of light in mind. On the plains, in the room where Nuair left, the black-haired boy stood by the window and watched the girl's figure slowly disappear into the horizon. His face finally showed a relieved expression. The next moment, the white-haired witch appeared out of thin air and stared at Luoya expressionlessly. Yes, indeed. Looking at the youth coughing up blood, the white-haired witch had a solemn expression. She looked out the window in the direction where the girl had left and calmly asked. In the previous battle, the girl's hand had pierced through Luoya's chest. Although the boy had anticipated this and moved his heart away, the angel's power still couldn't be avoided. This was the revenge that the Angel King left for Luoya. Nuair didn't notice it, and Luoya would never say it out loud. In the quiet room, Altacia looked at Luoya with a solemn expression that she had never seen before. Her scarlet eyes were sharp as she earnestly said, "So?" Time passed by slowly. Altacia's gaze became sharper. On the other side of the river, the mountainous Mother Earth and the gigantic skeleton on the plains were listening attentively, expressing their silent agreement as they waited for the youth to make a decision. No matter how one looked at it, he had already done his duty by pulling the girl back from the brink of becoming an angel. If he continued to accompany her, it would be suicidal. For days, maybe less. The black-haired boy smiled and raised his eyebrows. The white-haired witch's expression turned gloomy. But the problem was, what if she lost? Looking at the black-haired boy, Altacia's expression was as gloomy as water. Her scarlet eyes were filled with anger, and she couldn't suppress the indignation in her heart. I have to stay by her side. I'm her last anchor. The queen of the races isn't that easy to deal with. You should know this better than anyone else. More importantly, I'm waiting for someone. That's right. An enemy. Or rather, an old enemy. You can help her block the enemy, but the evolution of her bloodline is ultimately her own matter. What if she loses? What? Do as you wish. If he wanted to protect her, he had to protect her completely. Besides, there were some things that needed to be resolved. It was already noon. The sun was shining brightly above her head. The early winter in the Tark Plains wasn't too cold. There were still some plants that maintained their green color. The sun's rays made one feel warm. In the eyes of those who like to go out, this must be a good place to have a picnic. Looking at the corpses of the mutants on the ground, the girl hugged her legs and thought expressionlessly. The arrival of the Nuair was like a calamity for the mutants. She descended like a god, giving everyone, no matter their status, the right to equality. After the slaughter that wasn't painful, and even brought some joy, the girl's angelization finally came to a temporary stop. Hugging her knees, the Nuair muttered to herself. Thinking back to how she was in front of the boy, her body trembled slightly in fear. After gaining the upper hand once, the power of the Angel King had obviously become stronger. Nu-A found it increasingly difficult to control herself. The fear of losing her sense of self was bone-chilling. However, what made the girl even more fearful was that the power within her body was intending to kill Luoya. Swearing in her heart, the girl glanced at the corpses all over the ground. The corpses that had just died were emitting heat due to the light. Fresh blood was gathering together, accompanied by a flock of vultures and a thick stench of blood. The bright colors eased her divinity to a certain extent, but at the same time, it made her vigilant. In fact, since the first time she came to the eastern region as a child, the Nu-A found that she didn't hate killing. Sometimes, she even felt a strange sense of enjoyment and accomplishment. The girl was actually very clear about the reason for this situation. It came from her atavistic bloodline, which made her eager to fight. However, the girl didn't feel proud of it. Instead, she controlled it. No one would like a bloodthirsty madman. This was the biological instinct of humans. Although Luoya was a genius in supernatural powers, she didn't like fighting. Therefore, Nu-A was tolerant and kind. Only during the birthday party when she returned from the eastern region every year, would she occasionally attack the boy because of the joy in her heart. Right food. Thinking of the hand that went through the boy's chest last night, Nu-A's heart would produce a phantom pain. Her expressionless face fluctuated, and the feelings in her heart urged her to do something. In the sacred White Hall, a white-haired old man was sitting on the throne, silently looking forward. The death of his son, the loss of the theocracy's stronghold, and the loss of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Any one of these could easily overwhelm a person. In fact, after receiving the news for more than half an hour, the old man only did one thing, and that was to repeatedly look at the scene. The reason was very simple. It was because he was John Heathcliff. 6 calamities. Although most people in Shia didn't know about them, they were not unfamiliar to the Vatican, who had been fighting against evil cults for many years. Heathcliff, who had a good relationship with the Akkad family for a long time, had a lot of records about them. It wasn't the first time that these 6 calamities, the messengers of Mother Goddess, had appeared in the Third Era. However, they had never caused such a huge commotion before. After all, these monsters all had one thing in common, and that was that they needed a long time to grow. Therefore, it wasn't their style to expose themselves so early and alert the civilization. Pondering over this question, St. John's face grew colder and colder. He had a premonition that humanity was about to passively welcome a magnificent era. He didn't know if it was a coincidence or fate, but the young people of this generation were as bright as the stars, as if they had gathered the destiny of humanity. The collision between the two would definitely cause an intense reaction. Now that the accident happened in Tark Fortress, the power that protected the girl had almost disappeared. However, just like fate, the young people of the Akkad family should have reached her side. Then, the rest was not something that others could interfere with. The white-haired old man prayed. Then he stood up and walked to the map on the side. His old eyes accurately stared at a piece of land. Eric took the lead. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.